everyone. We'll be beginning in a minute. We're just waiting for our commissioners to log in. Thank you.
I can see a fly.
Okay, are the commissioners all here?
Mr. Chair, it does look like you have all of the commissioners present. We can do roll call if you're ready for us, if you're ready to adjourn or convene the meeting.
Okay, I'm going to convene the meeting, the special meeting for the Carmel Planning Commission of September 29th. I want to welcome you all to the meeting today. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Bolton?
Present.
Commissioner Delves?
Here.
Commissioner Lehman? Commissioner Lehman? Here. Thank you. Commissioner Locke?
Present.
Chair LePage?
Present. Okay. The next item on our agenda today are the public appearances. Members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern, which are not on our agenda tonight. These matters will not receive action, but may be on a future agenda. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the Planning Commission regarding any municipal items which are not on our agenda tonight?
Just for the benefit of everyone in the public, if you're joining us via Zoom on the computer and you'd like to raise your hand, towards the bottom of the screen, there's a button called Reactions. If you click on that, you'll have the option to raise your hand. Then we will see it and we will call on you. If you're on your phone, a mobile device, or a landline, you can hit *9, and that will raise your hand for us to see it. If you're unable to do that, feel free to just unmute yourself on their Zoom app, bottom left-hand corner, click the unmute button, and on your phone, *6 will unmute you if you'd like to participate in this part of the agenda.
Yeah, we have a lot of people at the meeting tonight, so it's a little hard for me to see anybody's hand up. So if anybody would like to address the Planning Commission on any items which are not on our agenda, it'd be helpful if you just spoke up. I thought I heard somebody there.
Mr. Chair, we're not seeing any hands. People are still joining the meeting, and that may be what you're hearing, but no one's raising their hand or unmuted to participate.
All right, we'll move on. Okay, well, the next item on the agenda tonight are the public hearings. We only have one item on the public hearing. This is a design review and a use permit. It's 21-115. This is the Verizon wireless cell installation application. It's consideration of a design review and use permit. It's located on Carmelo, and it's an associated coastal development permit for the installation and operation of a wireless telecommunication facility on a replacement utility pole and on the ground adjacent to the pole in the public right-of-way. It's located in the multiple family residential R4 district zone. Can we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brandon Swanson with Community Planning and Building. I'm going to do a brief introduction here and then turn it over to Marty Waffle, our senior planner, who'll be giving you the presentation. I just want to note briefly that this is a longer than normal presentation just because of the amount of information we'll be covering and the volume of public comments that we receive. So we appreciate your patience. It will be between probably 13 and 15 minutes, but there's a lot of information to cover. I mentioned this a couple of times to different people out on the tour of inspection today, but I want to make comment that we are thankful and impressed with the public participation on this. Most people probably wouldn't expect to hear someone say that, but it's true. I mean, this is a very serious topic. And the level of participation and organization is just wonderful. It's the reason we all got into public service because we believe in the process. Every comment that we've received, every letter has been respectful and collaborative, even if there's a disagreement. So I just want to thank the public for that. That's what it's all about. By way of a brief history, most commissioners probably remember this, but for the benefit of everyone, 2019, there was an application submitted with the city where Verizon applied for 5 sites in the R1 zoning district. The city ultimately denied those based in large part on that zoning. This facilitated discussions between the city and Verizon. The outcome was a 2020 agreement. I just want to make it clear that that agreement does not require this commission to approve or deny anything. It has no bearing on the decision. It just allowed Verizon to come back with sites that they would have to apply for. It did delineate 2 specific sites. One was Sunset Center, which this commission and the city council have already acted on, that is approved. And this is the second site, the Carmelo site. That agreement, again, did not require a decision one way or the other. It noted that they still have to go back through the process to review. So it's not a foregone conclusion. Lastly, I just want to say staff's going to be presenting, but the project was processed in collaboration with the telecom law firm, which is outside counsel hired by the city in collaboration with our city attorney. They are here today to answer questions. The law firm helps to make sure that the city is in compliance with state and federal laws, including any preemption issues. So they are available today. They're also going to be a brief part of our presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Marnie Waffle for the presentation. Marnie.
Great, thank you so much and good afternoon. So the Planning Commission initially reviewed Verizon's application at the August 11th meeting and voted to continue the project with direction to the applicant to mitigate the visual impacts of both the pole and ground-mounted equipment. So this afternoon, we're going to look at the project location as well as the project components, including the August 11th proposal and the subsequent revisions to the equipment area. The presentation will also include consolidated responses to many of the public comments that we received, followed by a brief statement of the pertinent regulations and entitlements for the project, and then concluding with staff's recommendation. So the project site is located in the public right-of-way on the east side of Carmelo Street between 8th and 9th Avenues. It is located in the R4 multifamily zone. The project includes replacement of a PG&E utility pole, which is located just north of the La Playa Hotel parking lot. It includes the addition of an antenna at the top of the pole, as well as ground-mounted equipment to the north of the pole. The existing utility pole is 39 feet 10 inches tall above the ground and is represented on this slide by a green dashed line. The existing pole provides both electrical and telecommunications services. The new utility pole would be 46 feet 6 inches above the ground and is represented on this slide by the orange dotted line. So the height of the pole would increase by 6 feet 8 inches. Verizon is proposing to place a wireless communications antenna on the top of the pole, which would add approximately 4 feet 7 inches to the height. The total height of the utility pole would be 51 feet 1 inch, which is represented by the red dashed line on the slide, and is 11 feet 3 inches taller than existing conditions. The reason for the height increase is due in part to PG&E's requirement that the antenna be placed at least 6 feet above their transmission lines. The applicant is proposing a 6 foot 3 inch separation between the bottom of the antenna and the transmission lines. The antenna itself is 12 inches in diameter and 38.7 inches tall. It is concealed within a cylinder and would be painted brown to match the utility pole. A metal shroud or cover would be installed below the antenna to screen the connection with the pole. And this area is identified within the red oval on this slide. So at the August 11th Planning Commission meeting, the proposed project included a combination of pole-mounted equipment and ground-mounted equipment, which is shown in this photo simulation. The pole-mounted equipment was proposed to be screened by a painted metal shroud that measures 72 inches tall 21.74 inches wide and would stand off the pole at about 19.5 inches. The photographs on this slide are an existing site on Aguajito Road and is just an example of pole-mounted equipment. It's also an example of the metal shroud below the antenna, which is represented in the photo on the right. So these photos are located within the county, but they are an existing facility and are just intended to be a visual representation of what some of the project elements look like. By way of another example, this is a pole extension above transmission lines, and this facility is located on San Juan Road, again, unincorporated Monterey County, and is just a representative example of what that pole extension looks like to meet PG&E's clearance requirements. So returning to the August 11th Planning Commission meeting, the ground-mounted equipment proposed had a footprint of 13.75 square feet and was proposed to either be painted or screened with a 4-foot tall redwood fence. Based on the Planning Commission's direction at the August 11th meeting, the applicant has provided 2 additional equipment layout options, both of which include relocating the pole-mounted equipment to the ground adjacent to the pole. So the first option is staff's recommendation, and it's a 13-foot 1-inch wide by 3-foot 10-inch deep enclosure area that includes a grape stake fence, sorry. So the footprint of the enclosure would be approximately 50 square feet in size. And starting on the left-hand side of the slide, the equipment within the enclosure would include the remote radio units, followed by the battery stack, the equipment cabinet and fan, and then the PG&E meter. The second option condenses the equipment area to a little over 18 square feet. All equipment would be located on a single concrete pad measuring 7 feet 4 inches by 2 feet 6 inches. In this option, the remote radio units would be secured within a cabinet. So the battery backup component to the equipment does require fans to cool the batteries in extreme temperatures as well as during use. According to the product information, the fans automatically turn on when the temperature reaches 110 degrees and then turn off when the temperature drops to 95 degrees. When the batteries are in use, the level of noise generated increases with increases in temperature. So based on the test conditions table that was submitted by the applicant, which is shown here on the right-hand side of the screen, at 77 degrees, the noise level observed during testing was 50.6 decibels. Staff also anticipates that the wood fence enclosure would provide some level of sound mitigation. However, the 50 decibels is below the standard 60 decibel level that is typical in Carmel. So staff is recommending the 6-foot tall fenced enclosure with special condition number 15, which would require the equipment pads to be lowered up to 18 inches below the sidewalk level. This would compensate for a change in grade between the street and the sidewalk, while still allowing for functional gates on the sidewalk side of the enclosure. The height of the enclosure as viewed from Carmelo would be approximately 7 feet tall. And if space permits, landscaping would be installed between the fence and the curb. Staff is also recommending special conditions number 13 and 14, which include the removal of 60 linear feet of ivy, and replanting of native, drought-tolerant, and low-maintenance plants, which would be selected by the city forester. The city would assume maintenance responsibilities of the area, so selecting low-maintenance plants would minimize the burden on city staff, who would be responsible for the maintenance. Special condition number 14 includes installation of 60 linear feet of river rock curb, which would be consistent with the public way design guidelines. So the next part of the presentation is a response to the public comments that were received. So the first commenter stated that the city does not have the authority to approve the current application based on the findings from the 2019 application. So the 2019 project included 5 sites, all located within the R1 zone, where wireless facilities are prohibited. The current project consists of 1 site in the R4 zone, where wireless facilities are discouraged but not prohibited. So the applications are similar in that they are located on utility poles in the public right-of-way, but they are not identical and must be analyzed separately. So concerns have been expressed that the project would create an adverse visual impact to the La Playa Hotel. As discussed during the project description, the facility would be located on an existing utility pole and has been designed to blend with the pole. All pole-mounted equipment has been removed and placed on the ground adjacent to the pole in a landscaped area that would be screened with a 6-foot-tall grape stake fence. Some concerns have been expressed that the facility does not comply with the 24-foot height limit in the R4 zone. However, utility poles are not subject to this height restriction. Additionally, the wireless facility would not be technically feasible at the 24-foot height due to signal obstructions by surrounding buildings, as well as the natural environment. Concerns were also expressed over future by right height increases of the utility pole. And federal law does permit height increases by 10 feet or 10%, whichever is greater. However, such an increase is likely to exceed the structural capacity of the pole and would require the pole to be replaced. A replacement pole would be subject to a new design review and use permit approval by the Planning Commission. Concerns have been expressed that approval of this application will require the city to approve all subsequent applications, which would set a detrimental precedent. The municipal code discourages but allows facilities in the R4 zone. So approval of this particular application would not be precedent setting. Additionally, the application submitted for a wireless facility would be reviewed on its own merits. And federal law does allow the city to reasonably discriminate among service providers if there is a rational basis to do so. Concerns have been expressed that Verizon failed to provide sufficient information about service levels or demonstrate a significant gap in service. The applicant did provide coverage maps as well as a project narrative describing service levels and facility needs. No viable alternative sites were identified outside of the R1 zone, and the availability of utility poles within the R4 zone is further limited when PG&E requirements are factored in. So commenters have stated that the Planning Commission is not required to approve the project under the 2020 agreement, and this statement is correct. The 2020 agreement allows Verizon to try to find an acceptable deployment plan while acknowledging the city's concerns regarding placement of wireless facilities in the R1 zone. Verizon has reduced the number of facilities proposed in the right-of-way from 5 to 1 and is subject to a public review process. Concerns were expressed regarding inadequate notice to the general public regarding the project. The municipal code sets forth the public noticing requirements, which were carried out for both the August 11th and today's meeting. Those requirements include publishing a notice in the pine cone, mailing a notice to all property owners within 300 feet of the project, hand delivery of a notice to all properties within 100 feet, and posting of the notice at the project site. Concerns were also expressed that the proximity of the project to residences will decrease property values due to diminished views, potential future expansions, potential proliferation of wireless facilities, and health concerns regarding RF emission exposure. For the Planning Commission to consider a denial on any of these grounds, the decision would need to be supported by substantial evidence. The courts have held that speculative or generalized concerns do not rise to the level of substantial evidence and therefore cannot be a grounds for denial. Concerns have been expressed regarding negative impacts to the La Playa Hotel, as well as the Seafred Holmes House, which is the Dramoff residence, as registered historic resources. So according to the California Environmental Quality Act, the threshold for significant impacts to a historic resource is a substantial adverse change, which is defined as physical demolition, destruction, relocation, or material alteration of the resource or its immediate surroundings. So concerns have been expressed regarding the project's impact on the scenic beauty of Carmel and the exceptional views throughout the village. The municipal code establishes 2 view protection areas. The first is an adopted view shed through Block 37, which is located on the northeast side of town. And the second is within the Beach and Riparian Overlay District. The project is not located within either of these areas. However, the Planning Commission still retains authority over design review and can require modifications that achieve greater compatibility with the surrounding context. So at this time, I just want to briefly restate the regulations that pertain to the project, as well as the entitlements being sought. So the regulations come from the Municipal Code Chapter 17.46, which is our Telecommunications and Wireless Facilities Ordinance. Also, our policies and standards for public way design, because the facility is located in the public right-of-way. And then Municipal Code Chapter 12.08, which speaks to encroachments. The entitlements being sought are a design review permit, a use permit, a coastal development permit, as well as an encroachment permit. So I would now like to ask Michael Johnston with the Telecom Law Firm to explain the Planning Commission's purview with regards to regulation of wireless facilities, and then I will conclude with staff's recommendation. Michael?
Thank you, Marnie, and good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so very briefly, I wanted to go over the general state and federal legal and regulatory frameworks that apply to this application. And I want to start with the state and then move into federal. And under state law and the California Constitution, cities have the authority to regulate for the public health, safety, and general welfare. That authority is derived from the Constitution itself, but it's further limited by California Public Utilities Code Section 7901, which grants telephone corporations a statewide franchise to access the rights of way to deploy their facilities. Under this framework, local governments retain authority to regulate aesthetics, but they cannot generally prohibit telephone corporations from deploying their sites in the rights of way. In addition, local authority under state law has to be reconciled with limitations under federal law. And those limitations are generally found in 47 USC sections 253 and 332C7. Section 253 and 332C7 generally prohibit local governments from prohibiting or effectively prohibiting the provision of telecommunications or personal wireless services. As recently as 2018, the FCC interpreted this provision to mean that cities cannot materially inhibit providers from competing in a fair and balanced legal and regulatory environment. Now, what this means is that the analysis will focus on the service the provider wishes to provide, incorporating the capabilities and performance characteristics it wishes to employ. So if we're talking about improving capacity, capacity is an issue for consideration. If they're talking about increasing umbrella coverage, that's also an issue for consideration, but it does not require a significant gap in coverage to meet that standard. The FCC expressly rejected that test, which had been the test in the Ninth Circuit since 2004. Now, that doesn't mean that the materially inhibit standard is crystal clear. We have not really seen any courts interpret that standard and apply that test. So we have very little guidance from the courts as to what the test means and how it would be applied. But it's fair to say that the FCC did intend it to narrow local authority on this in this arena. There are several other limitations that are found in 47 USC 332 that apply to local decision making over wireless facilities. Those are that the city cannot unreasonably discriminate against functionally equivalent service providers, that you have to have substantial evidence in the written record to make the findings for the decision, and that you cannot regulate on the basis of radio frequency emissions to the extent that those emissions comply with FCC standards. Now, this essentially means that concerns about health effects can't be used as a reason to deny the application, and decisions that appear to be a pretext for regulations over RF concerns will receive heightened scrutiny from the courts. So that's just the general framework under state and federal law that guides the city's decision. You'll have to look to your local findings for approval, and also consider whether any of these issues of state and federal preemption will play into that analysis. Marty?
Thank you, Michael. So with that, staff's recommendation this afternoon is that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving a design review, use permit, and associated coastal development permit for the proposed wireless communications facility. Staff is also seeking a recommendation from the Planning Commission to take to the City Council on a permanent encroachment permit. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Are there questions for Marnie from the commissioners?
Okay. This is, go to Zoom, and the.
I've got a question.
And the passcode is a capital I.
So I wonder if Marnie could help us with the distinction between R1 and R4 for the public's benefit, just because there's a lot of comment about that in our comments that we received.
Sure. So our R1 district is our predominant residential district in Carmel. It is for single family residential. The R4 district is a multifamily district, and that's really intended for higher density residential uses. In this particular case, the hotel is located within the multifamily zoning. There are no long-term residences in this particular zone. But really what distinguishes the two districts is the density of residences that is permitted.
Thanks, I think that's helpful. Can you give us a distinction in this neighborhood about where exactly the R4 extends and where the R1 is?
Sure. So our municipal code and our zoning ordinance establish that the boundaries of the zoning districts extend to the center line of our streets.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Do any of the other commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Delves?
Thank you. Marnie, you mentioned that the pieces of our code that are in play here, primarily telecom and wireless facilities under Chapter 17.46. But you did not mention that also under section 17.12.020, which is part of the R4 district design regs, and item H does have outdoor antenna language, and that is in fact where item number 5 there says no part of any antenna shall be higher than 24 feet. No part of any antenna shall be higher than 24 feet, along with 4 other conditions. And just the fact that you did mention the 24 feet, but you did not quote this piece of our code as being relevant. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so that would have just been an oversight on my part. That certainly is the governing section of the code for the R4 district. And if you'd like me to speak a little bit more to the height restriction, I certainly can.
I think we'll come back to it, Marnie. I just wanted to, I think you explained, and I do think you did incorporate this into your decision. And I was just confused because you hadn't referenced it. And on the 24 feet and some other ones, I think I'll come back on that with my own specific comments. I told Brandon I would ask this question, and Brandon, if you want to take it, please do. It was just very noticeable as I wound through the various documents. I was not involved in the 2019 decisions or process, so I had a lot of catching up to do with documents, but that the 2019, or whether, I think it was the 2019 document, basically that was written up to essentially defend the denial of the 5 proposed antennas, towers in the R1 district. When I read it, I found it to be a very thorough defense of the denial. And it very much had that tone. And then as I understand it, you mentioned there was a 2020 agreement, which I have not seen. And then today's findings by staff, they just have a very different tone. And I find the tone to be much more supportive of approval. And you did, thank you, go into some explanation of that by essentially saying, different applications, different criteria. But with all that said, was staff in any way directed by anyone in City Hall, whether that's, I don't need to name names, was direction provided to be more supportive of this approval?
Oh, thank you for that question, Commissioner Dells. I think that certainly is on people's minds, and it's an important one to ask. The short answer is no, absolutely not. Staff doesn't receive direction one way or the other to support or deny projects from anyone at City Hall or elected officials or anything like that. We come forward with our independent judgment based on our analysis of the project. We do it for every project, and this one's no different.
Thank you. And then last question, some comments have alluded to the fact that somebody makes money off of cell towers other than just Verizon, like through leases and such things. Is that a factor here? Is the town, there's the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea generating any revenue from this proposal, or would the city?
No, this is slightly different. I think you're alluding maybe to the Sunset Center where there was a lease payment. That's not the case here in this one.
Does PG&E benefit financially?
That I don't know because we're not privy to those sort of agreements. You could certainly ask the applicant that question.
Brandon, I'm happy to answer that as well. Those, Commissioner, those rates are regulated by the CPUC and the FCC. So PG&E does not really get any financial benefit. They're essentially entitled to cost recovery, but not making a profit.
Okay, that's all my questions for now, Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Dose. Are there any other commissioners that would like to ask some questions of staff? Commissioner Locke or Commissioner Lehman?
Not at this time, thank you.
I had a couple of questions for Marnie. In making a decision on this, the staff report stated that we have to meet all of the findings that are presented by staff, and there are two ordinances, specifically 17.46.020.A, which says that wireless communication shall be allowed within all zones except the R1 district, but such facilities shall be discouraged in open area spaces and in the R4 district. And then additionally, 17.46.040C also says that wireless communication facilities are discouraged in the public right-of-way. So I think it would be helpful if you could provide some context for why they're discouraged and why these are being supported in these specific areas.
Certainly. So we do recognize that the code does discourage facilities in the right-of-way. But as we've kind of learned through processing these applications, there's more recent federal and state law that grants wireless carriers the authority to locate in the right-of-way. And because our code is not a strict prohibition, that gives us the discretion to consider these types of facilities in the right-of-way. I can only sort of presume what the intent was behind that regulation in discouraging them, which is to avoid visual clutter, and to maintain the village aesthetic, which is really important to us all. So the fact that this facility is taking advantage of an existing pole is preferred over having an additional pole be erected in the right-of-way to support the facility. And in that respect, I think the Planning Commission has the discretion to approve the project, even though the code discourages them in the right-of-way.
So I have a question for Michael Johnston. Is it your legal opinion that that these ordinances have been overridden by recent federal or state decisions, legal decisions?
I think the ordinance that was drafted in 2004 is subject to some very recent limitations and changes in federal regulations. Yes, I do. The type of standard that used to apply to facilities in the rights of way, the effective prohibition test, has significantly narrowed local authority to make decisions about whether they can or cannot keep facilities out of a particular location. In addition, state law already grants telephone corporations the right to deploy their facilities in the public rights of way. So we cannot broadly prohibit their access to the rights of way to deploy their facilities. And the applicant would potentially have a claim against the city if the city denied all access to the rights of way to deploy their facilities. So we've interpreted the discouragement in the code not to be an outright prohibition, because doing so would violate federal and state law.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that explanation. Once again, are there any questions from the commissioners for either Mr. Johnston or Marnie? Okay, hearing none. Before we go on with the public hearing, I'd like to kind of go over some of the guidelines that I'm going to try to put in place tonight so that everybody has an opportunity to make a timely and fair presentation. We have a lot of speakers tonight. So the order will be the next speaker will be the applicants, and they will make their presentation. I will allow the applicants 3 minutes each for each of their particular individuals who want to make their presentation. And then after the public comments, I will allow them a rebuttal time of 5 minutes. Speakers from the general public will be allowed 3 minutes to make their presentation. If they feel that they have additional comments that they haven't already made, or they want to make a rebuttal to a comment that's been made, they can raise their hand and I will acknowledge them. But once again, that's not so that they can repeat things they've already said. It's just so that they can provide new information or in the form of a rebuttal. So that's how we will conduct this. So at this time, I will call upon the applicant to start their testimony.
Hello, this is Pete Shubin with Sequoia Deployment Services. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to share a slide, if you could see that.
If I could, I'm sorry, Pete, to interrupt you, Mr. Chair. Did you want to set a time limit for the applicant's testimony?
Yeah, I did. It's going to be 3 minutes.
3 minutes. I'm sorry if you said that. I missed
Yeah,
that.
so you have 3 minutes to make each presentation of each applicant in your team, and then you'll have a 5-minute rebuttal time at the end.
Thank you, sir.
Introduce the team.
And Mr. Steuben, Mr. Shubin, it would be helpful if you introduced yourself in terms of what is your connection to the project.
I will. Can you see the slide I'm sharing on the screen?
Not yet.
No.
I believe he needs to start his video. There we go.
There we go.
Can you see this? Okay.
We can see it.
You're good now.
Thank you very
Introduce the
much.
team.
Yes, I will. Mr. Chair, my name is Pete Shubin. I'm with Sequoia Deployment Services, representing Verizon Wireless. I'm here with Dwayne Bonham, who's the radio engineer, Paul Albritton, who's the outside counsel, and Raj Mathur, who is with Hammett and Edison. He's here to answer questions regarding the emissions from the facility. I was going to give a brief history presentation, but staff covered most of it. The 2 points that staff didn't mention were the 2 top bullet points that are on the screen now, which was the 2017 and 2018 efforts where Verizon first contacted the city regarding locating sites in the public right-of-way and the code.
You're on too. Okay, thanks.
And then had the other discussions, including walking the neighborhoods, looking at poles and redesigning the network. Now, the rest of it was covered by staff. And the results of all this was 6 hearings where this Carmelo project was discussed, even though the hearings were for other projects, because it would get brought up as alternates. It was a lengthy process with lots of input. 4 years, included 3 network designs. And the key point is the result is a project that satisfies the city's requirements and meets Verizon Wireless's needs. With this, I'll hand off to Dwayne Bonham, who's the radio engineer, who would like to make some brief statements regarding the need of the facility, and I'll reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal. Thank you.
Hello, this is Dwayne Bonham. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, members of the.
Excuse me, do you want to close your screen this time? There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission and the public, for allowing us to speak to you today in regards to this project. My name is Dwayne Bonham. I've been an engineer within Verizon Network for 32 years, with 15 years of that being in the Central Coast of California.
I'm having a hard time hearing him.
Yeah, Mr. Bonham, we're having a difficult time with your connection. I don't know if you can be closer to your microphone. It sounds like you're underwater. I know you're not, but if there's something you can do to get a clearer voice, that would help the commission.
Is this any better?
That's much better.
Yes.
Okay. I won't repeat what I've said. Hopefully you heard that. The reason we're here with this site is because our Lobos Ridge site, which is up on a mountaintop about 3.3 miles south of this location, is overloading. That's historically what has provided service for the greater Carmel area. However, it was a site that was designed in the 1980s when we used to have analog voice service. It's
capabilities of providing the newer generations of service is very limited because of the distance between where it is and where the users are. To provide, as we progressed over time with wireless services, it's went more from a voice-centric service to a data-centric service. And the amount of data that these sites carry grows exponentially each year. And that is taking that site and making it something that is just no longer functional in a network that we're using in 2020s. We have submitted a package that shows some of our justification for this site, and that should be in the materials that you have received. And just a general statement on the coverage maps. Coverage maps are generated using the lowest frequencies that we operate. At current time, those make up 40% of the total spectrum that we have. They're very good at providing coverage over a wide area, but they are not very good at providing the capacity that is needed in today's networks. That is done by higher frequency spectrum, which makes up about 60%. The higher frequencies don't propagate out as far from a site. So they'll go maybe 2 miles out from the site at 3.3. They don't provide capacity in the greater Carmel area from the ridgetop. We need sites that are closer to where the users are using their devices. That is really the reason that we're doing this. We're quite concerned that the network is overloading during special events such as Car Week, and very concerned that should there be a fire in Carmel, that we would not have the resources available to you as a community to provide for evacuation and fire services if that, God forbid, were to happen. So that's part of why we're here and part of why we're so passionate about this project. I'm now going to turn over to Paul Albritton to say a little bit more about our project. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair LePage, members of the board. I'm Paul Albritton, outside counsel for Verizon. I'll assume that you can hear me. Thank you very much for your time this evening. As you heard, Verizon Wireless has spent over 5 years trying to locate facilities in Carmel. This is because, and you heard that from Pete, and as you heard from Dwayne, Carmel is currently being served by our Lobos Ridge site over 3 miles away, and 60% of our frequency, 50% of our network can't reach into Carmel to provide the necessary service. CTIA has recently reported that the amount of data being used by Americans has doubled over the last 4 years. We proposed 5 small cells in Carmel, as you heard, in 2019. Those were in R1 zones and denied. We entered into an agreement with the city, which basically initiated a statute of limitations on those denials. So to the extent others are trying to relate those findings to the site tonight, Verizon Wireless still can challenge those findings if should things not move forward as in this compromise that was created by this agreement to try and provide service to Carmel with the least intrusive impacts, that being by reducing 5 R1 facilities to 1 R4 facility. The staff, I think, has fully explained to you the findings that can be made, the 7 CUP findings, the 3 design review findings that can be made in a very thorough report. They've also fully explained all of the criticisms and concerns you're going to hear in public comment. We'd be happy to address those in rebuttal, but we encourage you to follow the recommendation of staff. We think it's that they have worked hard and I think diligently to make the recommendation they are this evening. I'll just make one quick comment about 2 of the issues that came up regarding the administrative review under Section 6409 of the Spectrum Act. That's the same kind of review that you did for the Sunset Center. So to the extent that you don't think you'll have some control over any expansion of this telephone pole, you'll have the same kind of rights that you exercised under the Sunset Center, which I think were very expansive. But we concur that you cannot increase the height of this pole without replacing the pole. PG&E is under very strict structural requirements, as you might anticipate. With respect to evidence of the gap, we submitted substantial evidence of the gap for the 2019 applications. That information still remains the same. And as Dwayne explained to you, our Lobos Bridge site is already showing signs of exceeding its available capacity at times during the network, which is something of great concern to Verizon Wireless that they need to remedy to provide this very essential service to your community for times of crisis and for high capacity times and really for the general use of the community. We're available for more questions. Raj Mathur is here and can answer questions on Hammond and Edison, but will not make a statement. Thank you.
Does that conclude the applicant's presentation at this time?
Yes, that concludes the applicant's presentation at this time. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Locke, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Albritton. Can you explain to us why in 2019 you proposed 5 different small cell sites, and today apparently this one and the one that you've negotiated with at Sunset Center seems to be sufficient to meet the needs? What changed?
Well, and Dwayne Bonham can explain that better than I can, but the 5 small cells that were proposed were designed to provide the necessary coverage we needed in Carmel. Verizon Wireless is working very hard to work with the community. And so as part of the agreement, we moved 2 of the 5 cells into county land. So they're right across the Carmel line on the southern border of Carmel. And so impose those whatever impacts there are on your county residents to the south. With respect to nodes 2 and 3, those were combined into the Sunset Center, where we put a higher, slightly more efficient facility on the Sunset Center. That was at the request of the City Council, so that takes up the other 2. But that left us with a hole in this northwestern edge of the city, and that's where we're now proposing this Carmelo site. We would prefer to use the initially proposed Node 1 location, which is slightly to the south in R1 area. We still are not going to have our best coverage there, and Dwayne can speak to that. This is a compromise, this Carmelo location, but we recognize that your code states a preference for this R4 district over the R1 district. So the compromise avoids a direct challenge to your code. If we're unable to fulfill the compromise, that will put us back into a situation where we'll be looking at those R1 zones. And as your council advised you, telephone corporations have the right to put telephone equipment on telephone poles in the right of way in the state, and that would be something that we would have to be looking at. I hope that answers your question.
Are there any other questions for the applicants at this time? Commissioner Lehman?
Yeah, I would like to ask Mr. Albrighton, am I pronouncing that correctly? Sorry.
It's actually Albritton, like all the British Isles.
Albritton, okay.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you, when you said there was an agreement about, you mean your agreement was with the County of Monterey, and is that how you were able to get those 2 sites there? And did you have to put up new poles, or were there existing poles there as well for those sites in Carmel? I'm assuming that's Carmel Woods over there.
Pete Shubin could answer the exact location. The agreement is with Carmel-by-the-Sea and was approved by the City Council, publicly approved by the City Council, and your council can explain more about that. The poles in the county are actually replacement PG&E poles, very similar to the pole that's being proposed this evening. So the replacement of existing PG&E poles.
So you had to put up totally new poles there then?
Pete, are you on the line? Are they both replacement poles?
Yeah, I'm here. Pete Shubin. The replacement poles, the 2 that were moved to the county are replacement poles. They're existing PG&E poles being replaced with a larger, taller pulse, very similar, if not identical, to what's proposed here. They are down in Carmel Point. There are 6 existing sites now built in the last couple of years north of town in Carmel Woods. All of those are in the county as well.
Yes, of course. When you say the replacement poles, was this at PG&E's cost or Verizon's cost?
Verizon's cost.
But it is replaced with a structurally more sound pole. It's reset and actually improves PG&E's structural resilience.
Okay, I think I'll reserve more comments for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lehman. Do any other of the commissioners have any questions at this time for the applicants?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Locke has her hand.
Oh, Commissioner Locke, didn't see you up there.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Can you give us the location of the Carmel Point towers, and can you also answer whether or not they have the same type of ground equipment that is proposed for this project?
Pete, can you take that?
Yes, the Carmel Point site 2 was moved to Carmel Point, generally at the intersection of San Antonio Avenue and Valley View Avenue. That pole was actually replaced today. PG&E crews were out doing that. The other site, which was site 5, is just in the county's right-of-way of Hatton Road, just outside of the city limits by a few feet. That is actually to the east of the southern end of town by Mission Trails Park.
Can you describe the equipment?
The equipment is the pole-mounted equipment that was proposed originally for this location, and it is also very similar to the Aguajito Road photograph that Ms. Waffle had up on the screen earlier. So that Aguajito Road site had a larger antenna, but the same equipment shroud and then a larger meter than was originally proposed here. There's no ground mounted equipment at the 2 sites down in Carmel Point.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anybody else's, any other commissioners' hands up, so that will conclude the applicant's comments at this time. I'm going to open this up to the public. I've had a request from the La Playa's legal counsel and I think management for them to speak first, so I'm going to allow Jeff Melching to speak first, and then he'll be followed by Mike Padula, and then we will just follow the additional hands that go up and hopefully get some kind of order. All right, so Mr. Melching, would you like to speak for 3 minutes?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Jeff Melching. I'm representing La Playa Carmel Hotel, as the Chair mentioned. They hired me because I have expertise in telecommunications law. I've represented cities up and down the state for the last 20 years. I've written a lot of telecommunications ordinances and litigated a lot of cases involving wireless facilities. But today, I actually think what's unique is that I don't think that what's before you is really about federal law or the Telecommunications Act or the FCC or the PUC in Section 7901. Your decision is about local law and what's in your municipal code. And that's what's your purview. If there's a need to change the local ordinance because it has problems under federal law or state law, that's the purview, that's the bailiwick of the city council. It is not your purview. Your purview is just to apply the code as it's written. And you have a pretty good roadmap for that because, you know, the same sets of findings largely that were before you in 2019 are before you now as well. So in 2019 and now, you had to find that there would be compatibility with surrounding land uses, and that there wouldn't be a conflict with the purpose of an established district. And importantly, that the facility would preserve the visual character and aesthetic values of the community. And in 2019, you found that the facilities proposed then were incompatible with the residential village character, that they'd cause an unacceptable degree of visual clutter, that they would unreasonably diminish public and private views, and that the equipment was significantly out of scale with the character of the neighborhood. Those were R1 facilities, and this is an R4 zone. But that's a distinction without a difference. You have a circumstance here where R4 is a discouraged zone. Public rights of way are a discouraged zone. And this particular R4 facility is across the street from R1 property. It was explained the center line is the boundary of the zone. And that means that those neighbors that are right across the street in the R1 zone are suffering the same types of impacts that you found unacceptable in 2019. So we think that the job is really to focus on that last issue that I raised, preservation and the visual character and aesthetic values of the community. And I think you have I can see a room full of people here that really sort of represent the aesthetic values of the community, or at least their view of those aesthetic values. And they're saying this project just doesn't cut the mustard. That's really where it comes down to. And if you'll allow me, I just have one more quick point I want to make. I feel like this discussion from a city staff report standpoint and from Verizon's presentation standpoint has been set up as a pick the least bad option paradigm. That is, instead of evaluating whether this project succeeds on its own merits, you're getting urged to say, well, at least it's not as bad as the facilities that were proposed in 2019, or at least it's not in the R1 zone, or at least it doesn't involve the installation of another pole on your property. But none of those are the test. The test for you is only whether the standards in your zoning code have been satisfied. And if they have not, and I think they have not here, then denial is the order of the day. And I really urge you to consider that strongly and not buy into the idea that you have to choose the least bad alternative. An outright denial is an option that is available for you. Last, I want to say my thanks in advance for your consideration of this issue. I understand that you are stewards of the community's standards, and that is a heavy burden to bear in this type of situation. Thank you. Of the day. And I really
Mr. Padula, would you like to speak next?
Certainly, thank you. Thank you to the Planning Commission for the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Michael Padula. I'm the president of Grossman Company Properties. We're the owners of La Playa Carmel as well as the Hotel Carmel, and we're also the managers of the assets. We've owned La Playa Carmel for a decade now and are proud members of this community. We're most proud of our collaborative efforts at restoring and renovating the hotel according to the values and historical aesthetics of the surrounding neighborhood and the Carmel-by-the-Sea Municipal Code, including the requirements based on historical input. Mary Crow successfully worked with Director Brandon Swanson and staff when reviewing improvements to La Playa Carmel, and has always been very respectful and aware of the Planning Commission's main goal of ensuring that the general plan and the aesthetics of the neighborhood are an integral part of the analysis when making improvements. We believe strongly that La Playa and Carmel-by-the-Sea continue to be treasured destinations because of the unique setting and the city's well-known and legendary efforts to maintain its historic and natural roots above all else. In fact, the historical context statement in the city's municipal code regarding the Planning Commission's duty states, because of the inevitable period of growth and expansion which lies ahead, the Planning Commission believes in what has come to be known as the Carmel tradition, a tradition from which there should be no departure. The people of Carmel do not desire the kind of progress that would disturb or alter the atmosphere and unique charms of Carmel. Essentially, this was a reaffirmation of Carmel's Magna Carta, a set of laws written into ordinances in the 1920s that codified Carmel's desire to maintain its residential character. Now, while we are deeply disappointed in staff's recommendation, we're grateful that the staff has acknowledged that La Playa Carmel is a historic asset. Moreover, while we strongly believe there are numerous legal grounds and established case law supporting the Planning Commission's denial of this use permit application, I am not here today to argue those points. I'm here merely to inform you that because of La Playa's status as a historical resource, you as the Planning Commission have the authority to deny this use permit on the grounds that the design violates the general plan and the historical aesthetics of this neighborhood and of the hotel. We hope that the mock-up of the extensive ground equipment and the tour of the hotel grounds demonstrates how out of character this very large cell tower and equipment is, and how it will forever alter the character of the property and destroy several beautiful views. La Playa Carmel is worthy of historic preservation, and its character and aesthetic should continue to be vigorously protected. La Playa was originally a scenic home constructed in 1905 as a gift to Angela, a daughter of the historic Ghirardelli family of San Francisco. Guests and locals have enjoyed the legendary La Playa Carmel for generations. In fact, in July 2012, when we finished the renovations, the SF Gate newspaper wrote, La Playa's past is, if anything, more present after this renovation than it has been in decades. The building itself is the greatest repository of Carmel history. It has also been recognized as a significant historic building by the prestigious Historic Hotels of America. Importantly, Carmel-by-the-Sea has treated La Playa as a historic resource.
Could you please conclude your speaking? Your time is up.
I would like to turn over to Bob Kavner, please, as the next speaker.
I'm going to, I see Sarah Boyle's had her hand up. Sarah, I'm going to call on you next. Mr. Kavner, I will call on you after Ken White.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a dog barking in the background. Good evening, Paige and members of the board. My name's Sarah Boyle, resident of Pacific Grove, daughter of Bill and Nancy Lewis, who live across the street in an R1 district, across the street from the proposed cell tower. As you are well aware, there are no definitive results yet from studies conducted on the potential hazards or adverse health effects from cell towers. The jury is still out on this matter. This does not stop continuing this item until studies are completed. Until adequate studies are conducted, completed, and found harmless, cell towers should not be allowed in residential neighborhoods, R1 or R4. Both are residential neighborhoods. That is what the R stands for, residential. I am currently, and unfortunately, a Verizon customer. I am also self-employed and conduct most all of my business with my cell phone. Do a fair business from my parents' home while they help me with my 2 small sons. And amazingly, I get wonderful cell service. As I mentioned, I am self-employed. My parents live across the street from the proposed cell tower site. My parents watch my children often, as they are my village and my safety net. Please, I urge you, do not put my parents and my boys in harm's way from the potential health hazards from this cell tower. All in the name of cell service, which I mentioned before is perfectly fine. As a former planning commissioner and chair of the Architectural Review Board for the City of Pacific Grove, I ask you to deny this application. You have done it once, and now is the time to do it again. I will remind you that your decision tonight should be driven not by fear of litigation, but by your community and their desires. That is your civic duty. I have not had a chance to study your municipal code to cite anything in particular, but surely you are familiar with it, and there is a code with regards to public health that will enable you to deny this application. If there's nothing in your code regarding health and safety, then you should deny based on discouraging this type of facility in the public right of way. I ask each of you to do the right thing and deny this application tonight. You have done it once. Please do it again to preserve this town and its people. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker I'll call on from the public is Ken White.
Thank you. First, I'd like to recognize Jeff Melching. I think he did an excellent job. I think he hit the ball out of the park. Excellent, and thank you. For 105 years or more, the citizens of this city have worked, sweat, fought to keep this a special place. We've looked at the results of different standards in Southern California, and with fear, we are concerned about this issue loosening up a little bit too much for us. Comfort. You know as well as I do what's going to happen. If the commission votes yes for the application, it'll be appealed to council. If the commission votes no, it'll be appealed to council, probably. 105 years of people trying to keep this a special place. This does not belong in Carmel, and I would hope the commission would understand. Those commissioners that choose to vote yes, they will be remembered as people that just don't understand Carmel and the 105 years of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Mr. Kavner, would you like to speak at this time?
And since 1999, a full-time resident of Carmel-by-the-Sea. This small city is the primary home for my wife and me. The Pinecone wrote a lead story with the headline pointing out that I am an ex-AT&T executive, and I head a group fighting Verizon in its application to build this cell tower. It had the suggestion that this is a battle between two telecom titans. It is not. If AT&T proposed this very same aesthetically inappropriate incursion into a Carmel residential neighborhood, you need to trust I would be here with the same energy and have the same issues as I have now. Like you, commissioners, my loyalty is to the Carmel-by-the-Sea, and they're my friends and my neighbors. Our group, Stop Cell Towers in Carmel neighborhoods, composed of concerned citizens, read the Friday staff report with a sense of stunning disappointment. It lacks a concern for the people who live in Carmel, and it has serious flaws. We went to work for 12 hours on Monday and 12 hours yesterday, writing a point-by-point rebuttal to the staff report, demonstrating to you that there are solid and compelling bases for your denial. We understand that you may not have had time to read it carefully, as this process did not give us time to prepare it, but you have it now. And I suggest you read or scan it while you hear the comments from your residents. This is the document. And one word about our group. It was formed organically right after your August 11th hearing. It grew large and all about being concerned of seeing a 50-foot cell tower in the middle of our residential neighborhood. I can report to you that you have citizens in this community, many women, who are extremely bright, educated, and critical thinking, and willing to give you their time to preserve the aesthetic beauty of our town. And you are fortunate to be representing these good people. You have the right to deny this. Do not be misled. You have the right to defend our general plan, and you have the right to defend our municipal code. This breaks many, and specifically, they break all of the codes dealing with aesthetics. I thank you for your service, and I would like to introduce the Honorable Jan Reamer.
Thank you, Mr. Kavner. Thank you, Mr. Kavner. The chair will reserve the right to acknowledge speakers next. The next speaker will be Jody Clark. Ms. Clark, are you there? You have your hand up. You need to unmute.
Sorry. I am in complete agreement with Ken White and Sarah Boyle and Jeffrey Melching and Brandon Swenson, I urge that this Verizon application should be denied for every single reason they voiced. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Okay, from the STC group, who is your next speaker?
Chairman LePage, it's Jan Ramers.
Oh, hi, Jan. Okay.
So if I may go ahead with your
yes, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to thank you, the entire commission, for the time you are giving this very important issue. As a former planning commissioner, I truly know the time you are spending on this topic. Something that needs to be understood is that there are legal cases that support municipalities in controlling the placement of wireless facilities in their communities. One has to do with monetary damages or attorney fees. City of Rancho Palos Verdes versus Abrams, 2005, is a case in which the United States Supreme Court held that Telecommunications Acts precluded monetary damages because it provided a comprehensive remedial scheme. The only remedy telecoms have to deny their cell tower applications is spelled out in the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996. The second legal position has to do with aesthetics. The California Supreme Court recently ruled that California cities are within their authority to regulate wireless facilities based on aesthetics and property value concerns and are not preempted by state or federal law. And that case was T-Mobile West LLC versus City of County of San Francisco, 2019. Also, the Ninth Circuit in Portland versus US ruled allowing wireless facilities to be held at a different aesthetic standard than other equipment in the public right-of-way. And as was noted in the 2019 Planning Commission hearing on Verizon cell towers, the city has inherent constitutional police power to impose land use regulations, including aesthetic and safety requirements under SPUC Section 7901, in which such structure shall not incommode the public. Note also that the agreement with Verizon for the proposed pole was written for a small cell tower, but the actual height and volume put it well outside the FCC's definition of a small wireless facility. The proposed pole is a macro cell tower. This is only one of the bits of misinformation that has been shared. The pole you see in the photos can change immediately after it is installed or before, as Verizon in this agreement has full control of the pole and may modify it without any input from the city or the Planning Commission. More equipment will be added to the visual clutter and the aesthetics of this tower. It is possible the pole is going to be used to cover Pebble Beach, which is with additional equipment on place. Since there is already good Verizon 4G service within the claimed area to be served. I have confidence in the commission to not be bullied by threats of lawsuits and suggestions of not having the power. You are the gatekeepers of our community, and the law is on your side. The city would make a terrible mistake to move forward with the Verizon plan in this inappropriate location. Thank you so very much.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to let the STC group just line up, and each of their speakers will have 3 minutes to talk. So we'll work through their speakers. The next speaker from the STC group can go ahead.
This industrial 51-foot macro cell tower proposed in a residential neighborhood of Carmel-by-the-Sea is not needed. It is not the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to cite federal code to make decisions. Rather, the Planning Commission evaluates and makes decisions based on municipal codes. So when evaluating whether the cell tower is even needed, the Planning Commission should focus on Carmel Municipal Code 12.08, which states that the applicant must establish need for the encroachment. It is Verizon's responsibility to prove that there is a need for this proposed cell tower. It is the city's responsibility to evaluate the need in relation to Carmel residents. Verizon's application for this permit includes their own coverage maps, fatally demonstrating that 4G coverage already exists throughout the city. They also marketed 4G coverage throughout the Carmel-by-the-Sea on their Verizon website. Verizon must prove this tower is present need. Any future maps or scenarios presented are not evidence for a present existing need when applying for this permit. Verizon has no evidence proving there's coverage need for the claimed area to cover South Carmel from 8th to 11th Streets and Scenic to Lincoln. However, residents submitted field test videos as real-world evidence in the claimed area to be served. These tests prove making cell calls with a Verizon 4G phone were loud and clear, and downloading videos successful both outdoors and indoors in multiple South Carmel neighborhoods in the claimed area to be served. The residents of South Carmel are not claiming issues with their 4G coverage. There's not an explosion of need, as 2/3 of Carmel's residents live out of town. There's not a large user population of use. Residents can hook to Wi-Fi through their cable indoors. Movies are watched on big screen televisions, also using cable, not cellular service. No alternative options were assessed to the Carmel Street location. Verizon did not show the coverage area of the Dowd cell tower on the Carmel Bell building, just 100 feet away on its existing coverage map, or the new Sunset Center cell tower, just 1,600 feet away. There was no assessment to modify either existing tower or alternatives. There was no assessment to modify any of the existing cell towers in Carmel County as well. In just a few weeks after notification of this proposal, the community sent 300 postcards and 55 letters to the city, adamantly opposing cell towers in Carmel residential neighborhoods. The applicant has not established need to place a 51-foot macro cell tower base station in the center of a residential neighborhood with a 1 square mile village, claiming to cover a few blocks when coverage already exists here. It is obvious that the purpose for this encroachment is not one of need, but some other plan that benefits Verizon or some other city or zone. The city has already allowed multiple cell towers in more appropriate commercial zones in Carmel-by-the-Sea and has effective 4G coverage. Verizon has failed to demonstrate an existing need for this permit. Now I introduce Greg Davies.
Thank you. My name is Greg Davies. My wife and I have a home at the northwest corner of 9th and Carmelo, which lies within 100 feet of the proposed macro cell tower site. The city is required to provide advance notice of buildings, plans, and proposals that affect residences in the area surrounding a proposed site. On August 11th, the Planning Commission meeting, the city was legally required to notify residents within the 300-foot radius by mail, and Verizon was required to hand deliver written notices to the homes of residents within 100 feet of the proposed location. To our knowledge, no resident received the Verizon notice and only 2 received the city notice. When the city had its closed door sessions with the attorneys to reach a settlement agreement with Verizon, they picked winners and losers, and in this without the consent of the residents who would be affected. Our group is in contact with 8 residences, a total of 16 people within 100 feet of the proposed cell tower. And although most, if not all of us, received a notice from the city today notice from the city for today's meeting, no notice was received from Verizon by any of us. The 100-foot perimeter that was given to Verizon to be used to notify nearby residences of this meeting is centered in the hotel, the Playa Hotel, and not at the location of the project. Probably another 50 feet distance difference. And if Verizon notifies everybody within the perimeter provided them, this effectively confirms that Verizon has failed to notify all the residents within 100 feet of the actual project. In addition, since residents can attest to the fact that they did not receive hand notices of today's meeting from Verizon, Verizon's affidavit stated that it notified all residents within 110 feet or 100 feet is defective and inaccurate as well. It is irrefutable that there are residents who are legally entitled to notice that did not receive notice due to the defective notice area. The inability for impacted residents to be aware of the project speaks against or in favor of it, speaking against or in favor of it, per the Carmel-by-the-Sea Municipal Code is a violation of due process. This fundamental right is written in the code and a requirement for all applicants. The staff may call it an error. However, an error which fails to comply with code is still a failure to comply, and it is statutory that there be no exceptions for errors. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Your next speaker from your STC group, please.
My name is Bill Lewis. My wife and I live on Carmel Street across from the proposed cell tower. We have very good Verizon cell reception within our home. If this poorly camouflaged, aesthetically unpleasing cell tower is permitted within a residential neighborhood, it will result in an expanding number of similar facilities in other residential locations. Once approved, the Federal Telecommunications Act prevents the city of Carmel from denying similar applications from others registered with the FTC, such as AT&T and T-Mobile. The act states that the regulation of the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities by any state or local government shall not unreasonably discriminate among providers of functionally equivalent services. Failure to insist on compatible designs and preferred locations for one applicant will require the city to apply the same standards to any and all future applications by Verizon and many other companies authorized to erect wireless facilities. Many cities throughout the United States generally, and California in particular, have cause to regret not saying no to discouraged locations, which has led to large-scale proliferation due to requirements of non-discrimination. Cities can't say yes to one carrier and deny similar design and locations to others. Cities that have held their ground and denied applications in areas where they would have an undisputed negative effect on neighborhood aesthetics have been spared the disastrous effects of once beautiful areas such as La Jolla that have suffered the ill effects of out-of-control cell tower proliferation. The proposed cell tower is a macro tower, which will have ancillary batteries and other equipment exposed to public view, either on the ground and or on a pole. A 6-foot fence is proposed to hide the ground equipment, which might be acceptable in an industrial area, but not in a residential neighborhood. The city is also proposing that we accept noisy fans to cool the batteries. Where is the noise study that explains the significant negative impact in our residential zone? I can just imagine a real estate agent showing my home to a client and saying, yes, that noise is from the cell tower across the street. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. This sets a dangerous precedent on so many levels. Do not set this course for all Carmel-by-the-Sea neighborhoods. Please say no to Verizon. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christy Hollenbeck. I'm a full-time resident and homeowner. I'm within the area to be served, and I have good Verizon service inside and outside my home. I was proud of you when you unanimously denied the Verizon application in 2019. I know there's a lot of pressure on you. I hope you will be listening to your conscience and make the right decision for your community. There are many legal reasons to deny the macro cell tower in the heart of Carmel's beautiful historic golden rectangle. However, you really just need to ask yourself one question. Would you want this ginormous, hideous cell tower in front of your home? We all know that the answer is no. When asked why Verizon now wants this Carmelo Street location, after dismissing it in 2019 as inadequate, the staff report said, the change in Verizon's 2019 position about whether this location is technically feasible does not support denial. Rather, this changed position illustrates a flaw in Verizon's prior alternatives analysis that bolsters the city's prior denial for different facilities, because a technically feasible alternative, i.e. the site at 8th and Carmelo did in fact exist. Sorry. The argument presented by staff that Verizon's 2019 position regarding the location of a wireless tower at Carmelo and 8th is bewildering at best, or a misguided attempt to give a nearly $1 billion for-profit company with paid experts burdened with the task of determining coverage issues a total pass at complying with a municipal code at worst. Either way, it's wrong. Nowhere in Carmel's municipal code does it say applicants are allowed errors, or where in the code does it say that it is the city's job to point out errors and then say it doesn't matter. In fact, the staff report is practically gleeful in its attempts to ridicule and point out speculation on behalf of the residents of Carmel in its rebuttal. Categorizing Verizon's own admission that this location is unworthy as simply an error is not only comical, but it begs the question, what is the point of public comment by concerned residents materially impacted by this decision if it will be ridiculed and disrespected? Over 360 comments by the public were not given as much consideration or thought as an error by Verizon, who have the luxury of paid experts on their side, and apparently the town's outside counsel. This attempt to sweep the real issue and Verizon's burden to show us the need for the Carmel Municipal Code under the rug is staggering and preposterous. Thank you.
I'm Veronica Faustner. My husband and I have been the owners of a classic Carmel-by-the-Sea home located on Carmelo 2 southwest of 8th for the last 15 years. We bought our home, Coast Guard, originally built in 1923 because of the charm, aesthetics, views, and the sounds of the waves of the ocean from all of our windows. The ground floor, we appreciate that the village was proud of its history and worked to maintain the residential community, protecting local merchants and historical landmarks over and above commercial interests. That's rare. The ground floor and second-story bedrooms will have a direct view of the proposed Verizon cell tower, barely 50 feet across the street. My understanding is that this mega cell tower could become as high as 61 feet with additional equipment in the future. The legal technicality of the playa being zoned R4, one building in the middle of an R1 residential neighborhood should not override our property protections with R1 restrictions. No one can reasonably argue that what Verizon is proposing is anything but visually ugly, massive, and emits noise day and night. Carmel-by-the-Sea is amazingly quiet at night. We sleep with our bedroom windows open, rain or shine, so we can hear the soothing ocean waves. We do not want that replaced instead with a noisy cell tower just 50 feet from our bedroom window. We do not want to be subjected to potential health hazards. We know there are conflicting opinions of how much of a hazard radio frequency waves generated by the cell towers are, but do any of us want to be subjected to the risk? I don't think so. The City Council has been put on notice that we, the residents, are concerned. We don't want to subject other Carmel residents, our neighbors, to the same fate, since we understand that approving the cell tower will create a precedent for other cell towers to be erected in R1 zones. There is overwhelming opposition to this proposal. There is some justifiable distrust in a number of things Verizon has presented that do not look to be true or accurate. It appears that no matter the size of the opposition and how valid the Carmel residents' position is, the city will take the side of Verizon versus all the concerned residents. It is very questionable why the staff recommended approval by this application based on apparently erroneous and biased information. Our neighbors have done an incredible job of coming up with solid, credible information and arguments that rebuts and contradicts nearly every basis on which Verizon has made their application and provides authority on why the city can legally and rightfully oppose their application.
Your next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Kabner. I reside with my husband Bob at Camino Real 3 northwest of 9th Avenue, adjacent to the historic La Playa Hotel. The commissioners took part in the physical tour earlier today of the site of the proposed Verizon installation, as well as visited our home, among others, to witness for themselves the negative impact this project would have on our residential area, and in particular, our view. With respect to our particular property, the singular, outstanding, and unique feature of our home is the second story, approximately 800 square foot, very private and lovely exterior terrace from which we enjoy spectacular views of the Pacific Ocean and the exquisite gardens of the La Playa Hotel. Our interior second story living room, dining room, and kitchen also enjoy these extraordinary views. Approval of Verizon's planned macro cell tower in its proposed location would in essence dramatically alter our ocean view with an unprecedented and gargantuan 51-foot high pole towering above an all but non-existent tree line, which includes an antenna in an unequivocally industrial-looking ugly brown shroud, accompanied by an equally ugly collection of industrial-looking equipment, some of which may be mounted on the pole and some of which may be housed on the ground. My letter dated September 16, 21 to the Planning Commission opposing this project approval included a graphic photo depiction of the proposed macro cell tower as seen from our home. I think you would agree that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I ask you to consider the material aesthetic deterioration that would occur if this cell tower were installed. The general plan of Carmel-by-the-Sea sets out planning goals and policies and speaks throughout to protecting the aesthetic character of our most unique and unrivaled seaside village, to wit, quote, "The purpose of this general plan is to favor the general interest over the special interest in order to give durability to the Carmel experience and our special quality of living," end quote. Also, quote, "The city of Carmel-by-the-Sea is hereby determined to be primarily, essentially, and predominantly a residential city wherein business and commerce have in the past, are now, and are proposed to be in the future, subordinated to its residential character," end quote. These words were written in 1929, and we place our trust in your hands to make certain they hold true today. Please vote no on Verizon's permit request. Thank you for your time and attention.
I'm going to ask the STC group how many more speakers they're going to have. Can we get a count?
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, before you go on, I want to give some of the people that raised their hand because they're waiting. So Patrick Kennelly, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name or but that's just looks like your screen
Yes.
name.
Yes, that's right.
All right, would you like to speak this time?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner LePage and other commissioners. I am the real estate agent who represented Bob and Veronica Faustner when they bought their beautiful home, Coast Guard, which is just across the street from La Playa and directly in front of the place where the proposed tower would be. I want to tell a little story about what we did while we were in escrow, because I think it illustrates something about Veronica Faustner as a buyer, and it also illustrates something about you all as the commissioners for the city of Carmel. When we were in escrow, there was some question as to whether the house that was between the proposed house that the Faustners were buying and the ocean might be able to build up a little bit. And I can't remember exactly if the height was 21 feet or 24 feet, but Veronica and Bob really wanted to know. And she is such a hands-on person that we drove over to Home Depot. We bought a couple of PVC pipes. We hooked them together to make, whether it was 21 feet or 24 feet. And we went to the property. We climbed up on the fence. Perhaps we weren't supposed to do that, but that's just between you and me and the entire world that's hearing this. But we climbed up on the fence and we put up the pole that was 21 feet or 24 feet. And Veronica stood on the back veranda to see whether the view would still be preserved. And it turns out that it would have been. The reason that I mention that is because this is the level of granularity with which people calculate property values. Will you still have a view? And there's also the element of the fact that the commission so tightly regulates what can be done when people in residential neighborhood are proposing anything at all, any kind of change at all. We take that into account, and we think that that's why Carmel has the property values that it does. You're very considerate of neighbors. And I would just urge you, all of the commissioners, to show that same consideration here. Please take into account the value that will be, that this cell tower, the negative value that this would add to that property. One of the previous speakers mentioned, can you imagine a real estate agent having to say, please ignore that low hum, or please ignore that unsightly tower? I cringe because I can imagine myself being in that position. The approval of this tower would have a negative effect directly, not only on the Fausners and on other neighbors, but other property owners if it sets a precedent for future tower placements. So please use your discretion and do not approve this placement. Thank you.
My apologies, I was muted. The next STC speaker, please.
My name is Michelle Altman. I'm a senior real estate advisor over 20 years here in Carmel-by-the-Sea. I work for Sotheby's International Realty, and I've already entered my letter into the record, which I will try to get to, but I did want to admit this into the discussion. This is what we call in real estate a California Association of Realtors CAR form, statewide buyer and seller advisory. This is submitted on every transaction for real estate.
And Ms. Altman, could you please get a little bit closer to the microphone? It's a little bit difficult.
Anyway, at any rate, everything imaginable has to be disclosed here for a buyer and a seller to acknowledge. On page 8 of this advisory, we have what is called the neighborhood area, personal factors, intended use, smoking, and other restrictions. It says here, buyer and seller are advised that the following may affect the property or buyer's intended use of the property. It goes on to say area and neighborhood conditions, including schools, proximity to law enforcement, crime, fire, government services, wireless internet, and other communications or other technology services and installations, proximity to medical marijuana growing or distribution, cell phone towers, manufacturing, commercial, industrial, airport, and agricultural activities. You get the gist. Any other any other source that could affect your property's values. So it's right here. We're happy to scan a copy to you. Cell towers are placed right next to marijuana dispensaries and industrial facility sites. So I'm disappointed to hear our city fathers are once again being pressured by the telecom industry to install unsightly cell towers in Carmel. Every realtor here understands these ugly cell towers will destroy the property values, character, historical nature, and pristine neighborhoods. Homeowners specifically come to buy homes in Carmel-by-the-Sea to enjoy its magnificent scenic beauty and historical character. They do not envision neon signs, huge looming cell towers, or other blight in these rarefied neighborhoods. We are all pushing for underground equipment, not more visual debris and cell towers. We want, micro cable underground and removing all of this antiquated equipment that we now still see in Carmel-by-the-Sea. Regarding property values, there'll be a devastating effect of the value of the homes in Carmel. The planners must deny.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
The next speaker I'm going to call on has his hand up. That's Wayne Moon. Mr. Moon, you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. A quick few points here. One is, I think even Verizon would agree that these towers are ugly. we go through a lot of effort to maintain the quality and the nature and the image of our community, both for our residential enjoyment, but also as a community attraction for people to come in and visit and leave their money here. The second point I'd make is that other municipalities apparently are contesting these kinds of efforts. Isn't it prudent for us to wait and see how those contests come out? And then let's remember the other companies will follow. This isn't just Verizon who wants to put up a tower. It is other companies who will want to do the same. And then finally, there's a perfectly good alternative, although expensive. It's a perfectly good alternative that achieves the maintenance of our community in the way we'd like to have it, and that is undergrounding. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. The next STC speaker, please.
Time in Carmel for 50 years. This proposed Verizon cell tower will be next to Carmel's second oldest and most beautiful historic hotel, La Playa, and across from an historic house that is almost seen as an extension of the hotel. Whereas the cell tower does not materially or physically alter the actual two historic buildings, it will notably alter their views, and both are within the fall zone, which would impact them. But most importantly, this tower does greatly affect the sense of place that these two significant historic structures contribute to the scenic residential neighborhood. It alters the aesthetics, character, beauty, spirit, and essence of the residential neighborhood, which comes from having these two historic resources present and part of it. As someone who has spent many years living in Carmel, researching Carmel's history and writing books on the town's early years, historic homes, and historic downtown buildings, the idea of putting a 51-foot industrial cell tower in a charming residential neighborhood fundamentally goes against everything the city stands for and has stood for since its founding as a residential community well over a century ago. It is entirely out of character with Carmel. It is entirely out of place with Carmel. As two prominent architects and urban planners who are very familiar with Carmel remarked in their recent letter to the Planning Commission, quote, locating a cell tower in the midst of one of the most attractive residential neighborhoods in the state thereby diminishes its distinctive qualities, unique identity, and sense of place, and will denigrate the character of the community. The general plan states, quote, the special character of this residential coastal community is considered a unique asset of statewide and national significance that should be maintained as a resource both for local residents and for visitors. Aesthetics matter a lot in Carmel. Magazines such as Travel and Leisure consistently rank Carmel as one of the prettiest and best towns in the US, usually the only one from California and one of the only ones on the entire West Coast. That beauty and uniqueness comes from not having things other cities do that make them ordinary, like unsightly 51-foot tall industrial cell towers soaring well above the existing tree line in residential neighborhoods, with their ugly, visually jarring ground equipment creating visual clutter. The repercussions of this decision will be far lasting and may irreparably change the look of Carmel forever. This is a community-wide issue, and you need to listen to the community, to the large number of Carmel residents who have sent in hundreds of letters and postcards, all overwhelmingly opposed to this cell tower. And really quickly, I'd like to issue a rebuttal to what Verizon said regarding the city does have an extensive emergency plan, is 400 plus pages. Verizon can't bring emotional issues like that into this hearing. Your decision as planning commissioners is to decide zoning and aesthetics of this project, and it's up to the city council to address concerns with emergency response. I please ask you to deny Verizon's application of the Carmelo Street cell tower. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Please hold your applause. Okay, I see that Kristen, I don't know if that's your name, but it looks like it might be not your name, but you have your hand up. You may speak for the next 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Nils Raymond, and I'll be short.
Oh, wait.
At the moment.
Excuse me. Nils, we have another speaker prior to you.
Sorry.
If you just wait 3 minutes, you'll be on next. Okay, is it Dortler? Is that correct? Yeah, you have your hand up. Go ahead. You have the floor. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, this is for Kristen and Daniel Dodder. I'll be quick here. Carmel's own ordinance already disfavors applications such as this in R3 districts. Although the site is an R3 lot, the district, the immediate surrounding neighborhood, is essentially an R1 district. Please adhere to the city's ordinance in place. Please deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Nils, would you like to make your comments now? You have the floor.
Thank you. At the moment, 5 and 4G applications are largely in the future. One future application commonly mentioned is for unmanned vehicles, where a fraction of a second may be important. At this moment, however, I'm not aware of applications today needed by citizens of Carmel, and there are health, aesthetic, and other issues that you already heard about. Therefore, it would seem appropriate for the commission today to deny recommending 4 and 5G emissions at Carmel, as have many other California communities, including Monterey. About 75 years ago, Carmel denied rooftop antennas for TV until the technology evolved to where such antennas are not needed. I should mention I was born and raised in Carmel. We survived very nicely at that time and will survive very nicely again without 4 and 5G. Until the open issues, including even the need for 4G, 5G technology by Carmel's citizens, are resolved or better understood. As a last point, I see the antenna faces Pebble Beach, and I'm wondering if this antenna will be of benefit to Pebble Beach. That's all.
Thank you. Your next speaker from the STC group.
Hello, my name is Dylan Witt. I'm a board certified radiologist, and my wife and I will be full-time residents. Living
Sorry to interrupt. Could you kind of move closer to the microphone? Can't quite hear you very well.
I apologize. My wife and I will be full-time residents living across the street from the cell tower. There are many unknown effects of RF EMF, which is what cell towers emit. However, there is growing research that shows it can be detrimental to humans, animals, and plants. Hopefully you had time to read the article I sent in, which listed 2 specific health concerns, including increased risk of diabetes in children and brain damage in firefighters located in a fire station with a tower on it. We cannot view radiation in a vacuum. Radiation has compounding effects. People get exposure to radiation through work and environment. The cell tower would provide increased exposure to radiation. When evaluating radiation, the FCC is simply looking at a short time radiation caused only by the cell tower. Consider the pilot that gets on a plane every day and flies transcontinentally and gets the same exposure of a chest x-ray. Consider the telecom worker who has to work on these towers during the day and comes home and lives next to one of these towers, or a radiologist who does fluoroscopic procedures on a daily basis and it gets exposed to scatter radiation. What will the effect be of adding additional radiation from a cell tower, which you will have located next to the people's homes where they spend the majority of the rest of their time? Forcing a cell tower into a residential community is not appropriate. Furthermore, there are no current need for the proposed cell tower. In the field of radiology, we use a word called ALAR. It means as low as reasonably achievable. The concept is simple: achieve the benefit with as little adverse consequence as possible. For example, knowing that radiation can be harmful, X-rays are not performed unless medically necessary. Verizon has not demonstrated a need for the proposed cell tower. I have been told health issues alone cannot be used to prohibit construction of a cell tower. That is amazing to me because to me, health should be the most important consideration. However, health concerns do affect property value, which is an acceptable legal reason to deny this cell tower permit. Also, Carmel-by-the-Sea has codes to protect the health of its residents. Approval of this tower would be irresponsible and detrimental to the town of Carmel-by-the-Sea. I implore the commission to protect the health of the citizens and the beauty of the city and to vote against placing cell towers in residential communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Your next speaker from the STC group.
Hi, my name is Monique Yohannan. My husband, teenage son, and I own a home on Camino Real, and we live full-time a few hundred feet from the proposed site. I work from home as the chief medical officer for a health technology company. I am not a Luddite. As I listened today, I heard concerns about the potential need for this additional service that this pole would support if there were a fire. That was curious to me because I think anybody who lives in California or has been here in the last 15 years will remember that the 2007 Malibu fire was sparked by a wireless equipment on a telecommunications pole. Despite that, there are three numbers actually that I'd like to focus on. One is 60, one is 32, and one is 51. 60 is the average age of citizens in Carmel. Now, I am a geriatrician by training. I'm board certified. And when I think about the potential health impacts, as my radiologist colleagues say, also echoed, the idea that this is irrelevant seems quite disturbing to me. Nonetheless, I am familiar with medical literature on this. And I know that in studies of even 30 hours a week of exposure over 2 years, there's significant cognitive impairment that has been shown. We are talking about 5.5 times that, 168 hours a week, not 30. Even small changes in cognitive status can be a concern. In a community like ours, I think it's irresponsible for us to not consider the health impacts. The second number is 32. Prior to moving to Carmel and living here full time, I lived on a city in the hill called Hillsborough on the peninsula. That town is 6 miles square and one tower was proposed by Verizon. Within a very brief time of the town getting overruled on this, 32 towers were immediately put up. We are a 1 square mile town. The final number I want to mention is 51. Earlier today, people talked about 51 decibels. And though technically, yes, that is within the regulated amount, I would remind people that 51 is the number of decibels of an electric toothbrush. Now, every night when I go to sleep, I hear the sound of the ocean. What is being proposed is that every night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I will have an electric toothbrush held up to my ear instead of the sound of the ocean. My husband, my son, and I, we live here full time. This is our home. My husband has been coming here for decades. He first came here to the clam bake so many years ago. The Carmel is such a special place. This can only take away from that. I urge you to reconsider the approval of this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker I'm going to recognize is Dale Byrne. Dale, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Mike. If you could just exhaust the group's speakers first, I would like to hear what they're going to say.
You want to pass? You want to?
Well, I'd like to just go after this group is finished.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
very good. No.
Appreciate that.
All right. Okay, the next speaker from the STC group, please.
Hi, this is interesting, speaking with my back to the crowd. I have visual aids, so they're looking at a picture of a man with a Taurus field, and I've got one here for, oh, you're not gonna be able to see it. Yeah, please. So basically, my name is Kalyani Gilliam. I'm an alternative healthcare practitioner. I've been here about 45 years myself as a resident. I live right down the street also. But I wanted to, I was very interested in hearing why you're not looking at health concerns. And thank you for the last two speakers to bring this up, because that's really what I'm here to talk to you about. Because what we do in our clinic is we look all at the energetic field of people. As an acupuncturist, as a design clinical nutrition practitioner who uses muscle testing, that's all we're looking at. there's nothing solid in this room. It is all energy, and we are energetic beings, and these EMFs have an effect on us. There are positive EMFs. There are ones that are therapeutically positive, and there's ones that are detrimental, and we all have one on our person. It's called a cell phone. So this is a fact. At one thing, a month ago, the U.S. FCC Commission lost a court in the grassroots against grassroots groups, including Children's Health Defense and the Environmental Health Trust. The CHD chairman and attorney in the case, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., said this court's decision exposes the FCC and the FDA as captive agencies that have abandoned their duty to protect public health in favor of a single-minded crusade to increase telecom industry profits. This is a historic win. Maybe you don't know about it, but it was a win. What this was, the FCC was found guilty of essentially ignoring 11,000 pages of scientific evidence demonstrating that EMF's electromagnetic pollution, including what is emitted by the new 5G networks, is harming your health. If anyone wants to go deeper into this subject, in 2 days there's going to be a summit online you can attend for free. It's emfhazards.com summit, and they're going to go into the nitty-gritty details of what this is all about. But that's available to you. It's going to start, I think, in 2 days. I want to know, in our clinic, we actually do things to ameliorate the EMFs in the clinic. When I muscle test people, I find that their field, the field that you saw in that picture, that the earth has a torus field, your human body has a torus field, an apple has a torus, there's an energetic field. That field gets disrupted. It gets small, it gets asymmetric, it disappears. That's vitality decreasing. And these bits of computer technology we carry on our bodies, smart devices on the houses that read the smart meters that give out your information to the utility companies. These are very powerful devices. The cell tower, it's huge. It's hugely powerful. So I want to talk to you about, in 13 seconds, your health. You can't buy it, but you will find over time that there's going to be a deleterious effect on your health with this kind of technology. And would you buy a home living next to?
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker, please. The next speaker, please. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bill Hayward. I'm resident to this community and I'm CEO of Hayward Lumber. We have helped preserve and conserve the character of Carmel for our 102-year history here. I'm now a resident, live 2 blocks away on Carmelo and First, and I'm thankful for the council in 2012 to encourage us and allow us to build the first healthy home. So in a way, Carmel City Council has now pioneered the state-of-the-art healthy home here, and the subject of health and home, of course, something you guys have endorsed. The point that I want to start with is we live in Carmel. Why? We live here because we want to live away from toxic effects that are body burdens in other cities and other communities. We want to live in fresh air and a clean environment. That's our choice. That's why we're here. Living near a cell tower produces a constant body burden on the body, which has deleterious health effects. They range from nausea to cancer, foggy thinking, anxiety, and depression. I'm considered one of the national experts on this topic in healthy home, and it includes cellular exposure. I want to point out that there is no science that is not funded by industry that demonstrates that cell towers are not unhealthy. And I'll repeat, there is no science not funded by industry. There's plenty of good science out there that says it is deleterious. We have lived through the 50s in the cigarette industry and the story they told us, and we know we were fooled. And most recently, we've lived through the Teflon issue and found out that Teflon is in 93% of all the world's bloodstream and causes cancer and deleterious health effects. Let us not repeat that history, and let us be a little smarter than that. I know a lot about this because I was the executive producer of a movie called The Devil We Know, which exposed the topic and led to the production of Dark Waters starring Mark Ruffalo. These are the kinds of things that are changing public opinion about the science bought by industry. So let us use the precautionary principle. Let us not proceed until we have clarity that this is healthy. And since we're unlikely to find that, I think we would not proceed. Ultimately, though, and most importantly, this is not a Carmel thing to do. Carmel's always done things differently. That's why we moved here. Carmel's always preserved its character. Carmel's always disallowed things that don't make sense for the community. That is our tradition, and we're not looking forward to changing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Another speaker from your group?
I think that concludes the speakers from this group. Anyone want to raise their hand? That concludes the speakers from this group.
All right, thank you for all your comments. Okay, Dale, you have your 3 minutes.
All right, thanks. Chair LePage and commissioners, in 2019, a surveyor was working at the corner of my driveway at San Antonio 2 Southeast of 13th. I asked him who he was building a house for, and he told me it was for Verizon cell equipment. I told him to pack up his equipment and go to another pole. He made a call, and 10 minutes later, he moved down the street. I found it pretty interesting that when the city turned down that antenna in 2019, thanks to Stephanie's question, we found out tonight that they just got the county to approve one a couple blocks away without any feedback from any of us. It makes it clear that we should expand our aperture a bit, as they are willing to go just a few feet outside our boundary. Unfortunately, the neighbors on Carmelo weren't there when the surveyors showed up on their block. It seems pretty clear at this point that there's been more than enough information presented tonight to justify the commission turning down this particular request, or at least delaying it until legal processes play out and more research can be done. It also seems clear that we are currently ill-prepared for dealing with what will be an exploding number of these requests. And as can be seen in other cities such as Palo Alto, Mill Valley, Sonoma, Danville, San Francisco, and others, there's a much better way to deal with it by creatively crafting municipal code that doesn't violate FCC or state laws, both on an emergency basis and perhaps long-term. Handling this type of request one at a time with a short-term perspective without an updated master plan written to handle the technological, health, aesthetic, legal, and other aspects of this challenge will be nothing more than a whack-a-mole game forever. And it could present us with solutions that could change over time with unexpected results. To make it more complicated, over the last couple of years, the concept of undergrounding has reemerged in Carmel-by-the-Sea. Our town deserves undergrounding more than most, but as I have found out on my projects, our town also presents massive challenges to accomplishing it. Putting cell infrastructure on top of the very poles that we want to eliminate would probably make it impossible. Let's take a holistic look at the effects of that and include undergrounding requirements in our updated code. We're fortunate to have a mayor who knows how to manage our public meetings and encourages public participation. We've recently seen great examples of the planning department, police department, and council working in conjunction with the public in the recent ad hoc committee on long-term parklet development and our ambulance services. The parklet survey process was successful in gathering a large number of participants and was presented very clearly by Director Swanson. Chief Tomasi's presentation to the public on our fire and ambulance services was also very well done and enlightening. The feedback from the ad hoc committee was clear, and the committee's planning department, commission, and overall community received an excellent education on the subjects. The discussions continue to move forward until decisions will be reached on how to proceed. If we want to see city government working the way it was supposed to work, look no further than this group of concerned citizens. Like citizens from many other California cities, they've done their research. It's been apparently 17 years since our code was modified, and technology has changed significantly since then. I strongly recommend we immediately begin a similar, although clearly a much more exhaustive process to engage the public. Thank you.
Okay. I see Steve Dallas has his hand up to join the meeting. You have some comments, Steve?
Yes. Good afternoon or good evening, Mayor LePage. Mayor LePage, how about that?
Not yet. I'm just
sorry. Hey, I'm already
just the chair.
Chairman LePage, Commissioner Bolton, Commissioner Delvis, Commissioner Lehrman, and Commissioner Locke. Thank you for serving our village. With no pay, but because I know each and every one of you love this village. You always serve to protect our village. Tonight is no different. When you hear from a former council member, Ramers, Mayor White, and all the people there at STC, and Jeff Menschling, I'm sorry if I get your name pronounced incorrectly. They've hit so many things on the ball and on the spot. I hope you listened to each and every one what they had to say. What I think you've had happen is you've had probably, including you five and our own city staff, has been given terrible legal advice by Robert Tripp May, period. He's gone to other cities and he's clearly stated the opposition, saying that they shouldn't be put in. Clearly, somewhere it's coming from that he says it's okay to put into this city. I don't know if Mr. May or if Brian or any of our other team has been up here into this city, into this village, but you all better take it very seriously if you're representing this city. You work for the city, for the community, not for the telecommunications. And it surely seems that way. I couldn't read all your pages and pages and pages of your staff report, but certainly you must be getting absolutely terrible legal advice. This makes me get so upset when Dwayne or Pete from the telecommunications company says, when I was mayor, that they came to this council and my council members in 2017 and 2018. Absolutely untrue. I've already talked to 2 of my former council members as well as myself, and we never got notified. And so I'm very disappointed in their making that statement. When they come to bully these 5 members, you 5, it feels just like we had to go in and grind when PG&E blew up a house. And we were set to task to figure out what we could do. And Jason was there to fight that, and I was there to finish it off. But don't take their bullying and threats of legal. There's plenty of other attorneys that are much better than Mr. Tripp or Mr. May that would stand up and defend this city. And I hope Brian steps up and defends this city, because he's going to be on the hook if this gets done. I can promise you that. There's a lot of people that are completely disappointed, and not by our staff, but our legal counsel. Thank you so much, Chairman LePage and fellow planning commissioners.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, I see a caller with the last phone digits 258. He's got their hand up. Would you like to make your comments? You need to unmute.
If you'd like to unmute yourself, if you're on your phone ending in 258, you can hit *6, and that will unmute your device. Oh, there you go.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. This is Michael McWalters, Scenic Road, 2 north of 11th. And I just want to associate myself with every person who spoke tonight in opposition to the cell tower. You stole all of my arguments, so you are awesome. Number 1 is I routinely walk Carmelo when I'm in Carmel. And when I'm walking, I'm routinely talking to my wife, Jean, on the phone, and the reception is perfect. And I'm a Verizon cell phone customer, so service is excellent. It's perfect. And it begs the question, what's going to benefit us with this 51-foot cell tower that likely will become 61-foot? And I was trying to figure it out, and you guys confirmed it tonight from Verizon. There's a gap in the northwest corner. Well, that gap represents Pebble Beach. So you want to blight our neighborhood with a 51-foot tower for Pebble Beach. I'm sorry, that's not a good enough reason. We've got this example earlier of Hillsborough that had 1 tower, now has 36. Picture our neighborhood, the rectangle, with 36 cell towers, 51 feet tall. That's a blight. Look at La Jolla. They said they were going to be nice and allow 1 cell tower. Well, guess what? They've got hundreds of cell towers. So no, we're not going to do 1. We're not going to do any, because California Supreme Court last year said we decide on cell towers, the residents and the municipalities, and Carmel's municipal code has it written in there. No, the answer is no. We're not going to do this. It's absolutely ridiculous. The U.S. Court of Appeals invalidated the telecom law of 1996. They haven't updated their radiation emissions standards. Imagine. So I looked up, who are the commissioners on the FCC? They're made up of lawyers. There's supposed to be 5, and there's 4. They're all lawyers. 3 of them have represented wireless cell phone companies. So the FCC is run by the cell phone companies. So let's have some courage of our convictions. Let's use 2019 as a precedent and say no to these people. No. The answer is no. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, do we have any other members from the public who would like to make some comments regarding this application? I don't see any hands up. The STC group indicated their speakers.
I would like to.
All right, very good. You have the 3 minutes.
Hi, did I connect? I live on San Antonio between 8th and 9th, less than a block from the tower. It's unconscionable. I agree with everything that's been said. It's totally anti-Carmel and our aesthetic, and that's all.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to address the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Just as a quick reminder,
there's a hand.
You have one hand. All right.
I got a hand. Okay, you 260, you have the floor. *6 to unmute.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks. Hi, I'm Jean McWalters, Scenic Road 2 north of 11th. It's my understanding that 5G has a shorter range than 4G, and thus, after this tower goes up, hundreds or even thousands of smaller mini towers or antennae will be necessary to go up on other poles and or on people's homes in the Golden Rectangle and beyond to equal the distance 4G has now. Is that true? Will that come next? Are we only getting a partial picture of what's to come if this application is accepted? I did not receive any notice from the City of Carmel, which leads me to believe that this is rigged for the corporate interests of Verizon and the Pebble Beach billionaires during a time when people are still not allowed to go in person to a city meeting, making it much easier for government bodies such as yourselves to slip in such a sweeping change to Carmel during the COVID lockdowns. That's all for now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
We'll give it a moment here to see if anybody else would like to make any comments.
How do I mute it again?
Okay, I don't see anybody. All right, I'm going to close the public's comments and open it back up to the applicant for their.
There was a request from Paul Alberton.
Okay, Paul, has he got his hand up? Where is he?
I'm the applicant.
Yeah, okay, but
I'm the
that's
applicant.
Right, that's for your rebuttal, right?
Right.
Okay, so this is the public comments are closed. Now we're going to have rebuttals from the applicant. And your rebuttal will be 5 minutes total.
Thank you, Chair LePage. Paul Albritton, outside counsel for Verizon Wireless. You heard of a lot of impassioned speeches tonight regarding the Carmel neighborhood and community, and we understand it's a special place. And Verizon Wireless is trying to provide we consider to be life-saving services to the community so that it remains a special place. We understand the Playa Hotel will be able to see the antenna once it's installed, but I have to say that with all of the installations Verizon Wireless does, this is the kind of installation that is designed to fit onto existing infrastructure. In fact, it's a 25% increase in the height of an existing utility pole. And perhaps those utility poles wouldn't be approved today under the aesthetic concerns of Carmel residents, but they're essential for providing essential services to the community. And we believe this 25% increase in the height of a utility pole, which perhaps occupies 1 degree or 2 degree of a 180-degree view, does not create the kind of aesthetic impact that you heard about tonight. These facilities are designed, as you heard, so that the antenna looks as though it's part of the telephone pole. It's been designed to follow that cylindrical shape. Many other issues were described. We do have a gap. We have a capacity gap. The frequencies that we use that are purchased from the FCC. We have to use the frequencies that are sold to us, and the majority now are in higher frequencies, and they can't reach from Lobos Ridge down into the community. We're experiencing capacity demands. These were shown in the documents submitted with our prior 5-node proposal. They're not required to be submitted, but that information is available, and the data is available to show that our network is suffering and requires augmentation before disaster hits. With respect to notice, notice was provided as required by the city, and I think the city can confirm that notice was appropriately delivered. With respect to precedents, there are, this is one poll. There are no other polls proposed. Verizon Wireless has reduced its requirement in order to try and accommodate Carmel. And those same kind of calculuses and analysis will go forward in the future. And I can assure you there's no flood of applications coming for small cells to Carmel. With respect to property values, we included in our letters reference to the Silicon Valley joint venture study that was completed this year that shows the property values in that case there's no impact from wireless facilities. And in fact, in that study, it tended to increase the value of properties adjacent to small cells. With respect to emergencies, there was a comment about emergencies and emergency response. The federal government has clearly stated that wireless emergency alerts are now the standard for the country. Verizon Wireless is trying to meet that goal. There are now requirements for battery backup and generators in California to keep that emergency response available. This particular, at the request of the City Council, this proposal will have battery backup of approximately 3 to 6 hours, which can be essential when the power is out, when people's phones are out, when Wi-Fi is out. I have personal experience of these alerts alerting me to evacuate and flee fire in my area. I want to mention quickly the 24-foot height limit in the code. Our analysis is that reflects antennas. We heard comments about television antennas, and that really is superseded by the more specific wireless communications code in your community, which does not contain that height limit. And clearly, as your staff report indicates, that height limit would eliminate or prohibit service from any kind in the town, because 24 feet would not rise above the structure heights of the homes, and the signal would be not allowed to propagate. I'd encourage you to affirm the very well-reasoned review by your staff. They've reviewed every appeal point. If there's any concerns of neighbors, if any of those concerns will lead you to deny this application tonight, we ask you to please request that we respond to that particular issue. There isn't time for me to respond to all the issues that were raised. I'm going to briefly stop to ask if any of my partners, Pete or Dwayne or Raj, have any item that they would like to respond to in the remaining 20 seconds. And if not, again, Chair LePage and members of the commission, we very much appreciate your time and attention to this matter. Verizon Wireless is trying to provide this enhanced service to the Carmel community. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have another hand up there. This is a new news. Okay, I'm going to open up the public comments again. So Michael McWalters, you want to push *6 and unmute?
Thank you, Chairman LePage. This Point Lobos facility comes up a lot, and my response is, why is Verizon not rebuilding it, making a new facility? I mean, trying to use Carmelo and 8 as a substitute for an inadequate facility on Point Lobos, that's weak. That's really weak. That's a weak argument. And as far as the other comment I want to make about the staff is recommending that Verizon get this permit, with respect, folks, you must not live in Carmel. You must live somewhere else. You might even be living in Pebble Beach, where you're not getting the kind of service you want. That's not my problem. That's not our problem in Carmel. So let's go to work on rebuilding that facility at Point Lobos. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give the applicant, time to respond to that. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's not Point Lobos, it's Lobos Ridge. So that's the ridge that's 3 miles south of town, 3.5 miles south of town. It was built 20 years ago when the analog signal was used for wireless services and was able to provide adequate signal into Carmel. There's no way that we can modify that facility over 3.5 miles away to use the frequencies that we are allocated from the FCC to provide service into Carmel. So there's no number of radios or antennas or any number of things that we can do from that distance and that height. That facility can only service so many phone calls at one time, and that's the miracle of cellular, is that you break up into a variety of smaller cell units, and it allows you to reuse frequency to address this capacity demand, which, as I mentioned earlier, has doubled in the last 4 years. I want to correct quickly something I said. Our coverage gap here is in South Carmel. When I mentioned Northwest, I meant the northwest corner of our coverage gap, which is in South Carmel, and that northwest area is in this area of the Carmelo Street and slightly south of that. So I didn't mean to misrepresent that we're talking about the northwest end of town. I hope that answers your question. Dwayne DeBonham, I don't know if you want to say anything more about Lobos Ridge.
Yeah, the Lobos Ridge site is at 1,300 feet in elevation and is 3 miles away. There's no modifications that we could do that are going to solve the distance problem between there and Carmel.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne.
That's it.
Thank you, Chair LePage.
Okay, thank you. I think that concludes the public comments and the questions. So I'm going to close the public comments part of the hearing. I'm going to open it up to the commission for their discussion. And
Chair LePage, I have a couple questions that amplify some of the
Okay, you have some questions for the applicant?
Both the city and the applicant, just some clarification.
Okay, Commissioner Bolton, go ahead, your questions.
So number one is for the city. Do we currently have other cell tower applications in the city?
Thank you, Commissioner Bolton. I was giving Marnie a beat there. To my knowledge, I don't believe so. There was recently an application to I don't want to say upgrade, but there's an existing facility on top of the Dowd Arcade building that's been there for years. There was an application that came in to update or upgrade the equipment there. To my knowledge, that's the only one we have seen of recent times. However, I will just give Marnie a second to respond in case she has seen one that I'm not aware of. Marnie?
The only other application that I've seen recently is for another, again, existing facility on a building on Junipero, and it was a similar application to upgrade the equipment.
Okay. And then tying into that, will there be any kind of impact? And I guess there's also a question about the legal ramifications of approving this cell site going forward. In other words, there's concern from the public that potentially if this one is approved, it will lead us to be unable to stop future similar installations being installed in the city.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to kick that one over to our telecom law firm representative to speak to that, Trip, if you would, please.
Thank you, Brendan. Good afternoon or evening, everybody. My name is Trip May. I'm sorry I was late. We're dealing with a daycare closure due to COVID, and so childcare has been a little nutty. But to answer your question directly, the answer is no. The Telecom Act allows you to reasonably discriminate between functionally equivalent service providers. And the Ninth Circuit's been clear that that allows you to treat similarly situated applications differently so long as you have a reasonable basis, including cumulative impact of additional facilities in the same place or changes in the community, including changes in your local code. So if you were to approve something tonight, you would not be required to approve the exact same thing over and over again ad nauseum.
And not necessarily from a competing provider. For instance, another person wanted to do another AT&T, whatever, wanted to do the same thing in a very similar situation. We would not have our hands tied.
You would need to become, the statute is written so that you do not have the ability to unreasonably discriminate against functionally equivalent service providers, which means you can't pick winners and losers. But if you have a rational basis for treating one application that is similar in a different way, then you can do so.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think that's it for the telecom for the moment. I've got a question now just for the city and our purview here. We are not, and maybe this is also for the city attorney, but we are not to be concerned with the potential RF emissions and the health concerns, legitimate or not, that the public is bringing forward to us. It's not within our specific purview on the Planning Commission to really consider that in our decision.
Commissioner Bolton, that's correct. I can give you the layperson short answer is that's correct. That's not in the Planning Commission's purview. Tripp may want to expand from a legal perspective, but from a layperson's perspective, you're correct.
Yeah, this is a hard issue because there is science that is in the record before the FCC contesting the FCC standards. And the FCC recently tried to affirm its existing standards, which doesn't take into account the new science. And the Court of Appeals did strike down their attempt to affirm those standards. But the end result of all that is affirming the existing standards means we go back to the existing standards that were there before they tried to affirm them. Meaning we are stuck with following the FCC's rules as they were written in 1996. And once we have determined that the facility complies with those rules, the decision to approve or deny cannot be based on the environmental effects of those radio frequency emissions that have been found to be compliant with the FCC standards. You are allowed to talk about it, you can express your displeasure about it, but it can't form the basis of a decision if those emissions are compliant.
And I assume in this case, they're compliant. Okay, so that's great, thank you. Moving along, it's the city's understanding, and Verizon may want to comment on this, that we will not have any additional equipment installed on this pole. And in fact, it's not possible because this pole would be considered substandard if they wanted to add more whatever to it. It's not, in other words, going to be strong enough or big enough to hold new equipment down the line whenever they feel like it.
That is the city's understanding at this point, but Commissioner Bolton, it may be a good idea to, if you want to, through the chair, ask the applicant to speak to that, just so we have that on the record.
Yeah, I'm going to have a couple questions for Verizon.
All right, so, okay, if you want to go ahead and ask the applicant that question and your other questions, let's get those taken care of.
That's so perfect. So it's not your intention, nor is it your ability to increase the amount of equipment on these poles going forward? This particular pole, because you're going to make it just barely good enough to hold this one thing?
Well, that's Paul Albritton here. That is the intention. I think the concern was that somehow we would raise the height of the pole by 10 feet or something like that. And, you know, over time, antennas change, but they don't necessarily get larger. In fact, they tend to get smaller. So I would anticipate there will be a time when that antenna will be replaced with some other antenna. The radios are, if they're in the ground cabinets on the ground there, then they would be, replaced within the ground cabinet or the ground area itself. But there's no current plan to do that. So the facility is 4G. It will actually, as we discussed with the Sunset Center, be toggling with some cellular band 5G, but there's no plan for upgrading at this time for those beyond that. But I've been in the business for 30 years, and I can tell you that as frequencies change, that the equipment over time will change. But as I said, it often gets smaller rather than larger.
Sure. So the public's concern is twofold as far as I can hear it. Is about the height and also just in general the clutter that would be seen. So it wouldn't only be whether it got taller, it would also be whether or not multiple new things were added to it at its existing new height. You know, adding the width or something, I don't know.
There are no plans to do that now. And as I said, the logical expansion, the logical modification would be within the redwood fenced area.
Sure. Okay, so since we're talking about the redwood fence area, I want to talk about the sound at the redwood fence area. 50 decibels was the sound at a medium temperature. It wasn't the maximum temperature. Is that temperature read in a similar enclosure kind of situation? In other words, I'm concerned about the fact that we're going to be requesting you to put these fans and whatnot and radio stuff in this enclosure. And this enclosure will increase the heat and therefore increase the fan speed and frequency with which the fans operate?
Those are good questions, and I'm going to throw it over to Pete Shubin in just a moment. Again, the city council has specifically requested the batteries, and that's what creates the noise. It's 50 dBs within a meter of the battery box. Now you got to remember that sound dissipates. So every time you double the distance, it decreases by 6 dB, which is half the sound noise. So 50 dB is equivalent of a quiet conversation. So it would be somebody having a quiet conversation, perhaps on that sidewalk. So once you're 100 feet away or 200 feet away, that noise dissipates and becomes inaudible, so that you wouldn't be able to hear them. Pete, and also the fence itself will also dissipate that noise to a certain extent. Pete, can you speak to the thermal situation with the fencing? While Pete's pulling up the mic, the cabinets themselves have to be spread out. That's why if you take the fence off, you're only 7 feet wide. If you put the fence around it, you're 13 feet wide. And that extra 5 feet is particularly to provide spacing between the cabinets in order to allow passive cooling. Pete, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's correct, Paul. The measurements, if Ms. Waffle could bring that slide up and share it with us, she has the chart. It'll show the distance, and that's a free field distance. That doesn't have a barrier of any type around the cabinet. We've designed the enclosure so that the equipment can be placed inside the enclosure and still allow for the necessary free airflow. So there won't be constricted airflow around the cabinets that would cause a buildup of heat and cause the equipment to run hotter.
Okay, that answers the question. I was more concerned about the hot days and potentially if the cabinet was going to increase heat and increase our fan speed and therefore exceed the 50 decibel typical.
No, we were careful to design to avoid that situation, and that's a reason why the cabinet is turned. And Ms. Waffle put it in her slide that way. When it's out in the open, it shows it facing towards the sidewalk, and then you can see it facing the fan unit facing towards the meter towards the side on the lower portion of her slide there, and that allows the free airflow to be maintained and not have it run hotter.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I have one more question, I think, for Verizon here, and that is, we keep hearing reference to peak demand and getting close to topping out during peak times. And I'm curious whether these peak times, are we referring to events in Carmel and Pebble Beach and the surrounding areas? Are we talking about the evenings when people are at home or something like that? What are we talking about when we mean that we are running out of capacity and also running out of peak capacity?
So I'll let Dwayne Bonham answer that question. I will point out that in our 2019 submittal, we included a chart that's called ASEU, and that's the average schedule end user. It was measured from the Lobos Ridge site that's providing service to this area. And it showed that the demands on from this area, because this one site has to reach so far to provide service to this area, is already exceeding its rated capacity. So we're already, even 2 years ago, we were seeing this rated capacity increased, which leads to slower downloads. It leads in LTE pauses in the phone conversation you may hear, or even a drop call. So there are levels to which it's already being seen that these diminish. So it's not as though it completely shuts down. It's inaccessibility to the network. There are too many people on it. You can't make a call because too many people are on it. You may have bars on your phone, but you can't get on. And then the reliability of the network, as I just described. Dwayne, do you want to add to that in terms of the capacity problem here?
Yeah, we take, because we don't want to add capacity to our network and design our network for peaks that seldom happen. So when we do traffic engineering, we do it on a monthly basis. We take a number of the top usage days in that. We throw out whatever the number one is, the peak, to take care of if there is some type of a special event, a accident, adjacent cell site were to go down for a day, something of that nature, which can impact it. Then we look at it over several months so that we've got a really good grasp of where we need to add capacity. This site has been overloaded for many years now, going back, I think, at least till in 2015, it was starting to show signs of overload. The concern is not the regular Tuesday afternoon in Carmel. The problem is when we see evacuation orders, and I just went through one, I've moved up to Reading, and we just had a fire here last week and received evacuation orders. And the problem is we get a look at this, being Verizon, we get a look at a lot of these events each year and see how different network configurations and communities handle this stuff. And we see very large increases in usage when there's an emergency, when there's a fire, an earthquake, something of this nature. And that's really when our networks are needed the most. If these days, if you're going to receive evacuation orders, it's going to be over your cell phone. I've got evacuation order from my house last week. And, you know, I'm in an area where there's ample capacity, and they came through. We've had areas such as Montecito, when they had the mudslides there, where the network capacity was constrained and there wasn't sufficient capacity in order to issue all the evacuation orders. It can be a very devastating thing when we run out of capacity. So we need to engineer not for Tuesday afternoon in Carmel. We need to engineer for the events that could happen in the future. And that's a very important part of the emergency services that we pride ourselves in providing to our customers and communities from the variety.
I think our data shows, I'll just jump in for just a second, that we're already seeing unreliability and lack of accessibility, but then several times a month, we're actually seeing a severe, catastrophic overcapacity situation. And it's true at 2 in the morning or midnight, your phone's going to work fine. Even 2 or 3 in the afternoon, it may work fine. But we're the most important part of that being we're constrained by the frequencies that we can use. And right now, 40% of our frequency is in the low band range that can reach in from Lobos Ridge, but 60% of our available bandwidth is not. So we're really hamstrung in trying to provide service into Carmel if we can't use the frequencies that are available to us, and we've already got these diminishing network.
Looking forward,
all right, excuse me, gentlemen, but
I think that's enough on that topic. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Thank you very much.
You
Sorry.
answered this question.
I have one more question, Chair.
You have one more question?
One more question. I'm sorry, I found one more on my list. I didn't see it before. I'm sorry. I know I said I was done.
Go ahead.
It's for Mr. Albritton. I heard in your comments that should the city not approve this particular site, you might move forward with sites in the R1 as an alternate.
What I was trying to say was that when the denial of the 5 sites occurred, we, under the Telecommunications Act, have a limited period of time to challenge those denials in court. And what we agreed to is that we would delay that, we would extend that amount of time that we would potentially challenge while we tried to participate in this mutual agreement. If we're unable to accomplish this compromise, then those R1 sites and the R1 area is back on the table. And that's what I really meant to say. It's not our preference. We'd rather work with the community and in this resolution that we've resolved. Does that answer your question, or was that?
That does answer my question. Was that the city's understanding as well?
Yes,
Brandon?
absolutely. That's in the agreement.
Brandon, was that also the city's understanding that should this particular thing fail, then it'll move more like forward with the 5G or not 5G, the 5 sites in the R1?
It's our understanding that's a possibility, yes.
Thank you. That's all. That's all my questions. Thank you very much for humoring me.
Right.
Thank you.
Before I call on Commissioner Locke, I see 2 other hands up, but the public comments are closed at this time. This is the time for the commission to discuss this. We've listened to all the public comments, and so now it's our turn to make our comments. Commissioner Locke.
Yeah, I just had a really quick question, Mr. Albritton. You mentioned something about the city council requires batteries, and this is in relation to the utility box areas. Can you explain that, please?
That's correct. We were in the agreement references that the city council would like to have battery backup.
Is that all your questions, Commissioner Locke? Okay, thank you. Do any of the other commissioners have any questions? All right. Okay, we're going to move to the comments. Commissioner Bolton, would you like to start?
Actually, I'd like to pass on this starting.
Okay. Commissioner Locke, would you like to begin?
I would love to say I'll pass on this too, but I'll go ahead and start.
Thank you.
Thanks. So to begin with, I know that cell services currently are primary source of communication. It's not landline telephones. In the event of an earthquake, a fire, which was mentioned, or a significant storm, we are all dependent on an operational cellular communication system to notify emergency services and our loved ones of our circumstances. I understand that we have sufficient coverage, which means you can access the network and make a call. But what seems to be at issue is the wireless density, which has also been referred to as the capacity. That's what we need when people use more data streaming music, chatting, and posting videos, and using smart technologies. The more data people use, the slower everybody's connections become. I also understand the need to ensure that we have access to a reliable cell network, but the infrastructure to improve capacity does not need to be located in our small and unique village. This has been proven by the relocation of 2 of the 5 former necessary small cell sites in the Golden Triangle. And I thought the discussion this evening to me was particularly enlightening. As a planning commissioner, I have to look at the project from the perspective of those areas for which we are responsible. And design review approval is a primary one. In that regard, there's one piece of this project that stands out like a sore thumb to me. That's the support equipment. And I think this is the same issue that came up at the last meeting. So Muni Code 17.46.040, site location, states that wireless communications are allowed but discouraged in the R4 district. So obviously we're talking about a unique situation with La Playa where it is an island of R4 in an R1 area. That to me is important in my decision-making considerations. The municipal code also states that facilities shall be integrated to the maximum extent feasible into the existing characteristics of the site and surrounding area. Subparagraph C says wireless communication facilities, to every extent possible, should not be sited to create visual clutter or negatively affect important public or private views as determined by the Planning Commission. Wireless communication facilities are discouraged in the public right-of-way. And again, that is another important point for my consideration of this application. And then finally, Muni Code 17.46.05, design review. Item E, or subparagraph E, says support facilities, i.e. vaults, equipment rooms, utilities, and equipment enclosures, shall be constructed out of non-flammable, non-reflective materials. Support facilities that cannot be located within existing buildings or underground shall either be located out of public view, and this is a shall be located out of public view, or shall be enclosed in an architecturally compatible structure on private property. Neither the proposed fence nor the painted cabinets meet the zoning code's design review requirement for support facilities, in my opinion. The proposed associated equipment creates visual clutter and would diminish the public use and enjoyment of the right-of-way, and it's not in the public's interest. It would be readily available to the public and close to private residences. The proposed support facility is large and bulky. The concept of the grape stake fence does nothing to reduce the visual blight, and I note that the grape stake fence is nowhere near architecturally compatible with the nearby buildings, which are stucco and stone. So I can't support the project for those reasons. I also want to add to that, I had a discussion with a friend of mine who works for the Pebble Beach company regarding the wireless network in the Pebble Beach area. And I know there were some comments made earlier in this presentation about Pebble Beach, but the Pebble Beach Del Monte Forest Property Owners Association, in support of with support of the Pebble Beach company and Pebble Beach Community Services District, designed a single wireless network to serve the Del Monte Forest. And so that network includes 6 different sites in the Del Monte Forest, complementing existing sites at the inn at Spanish Bay and the corporate yard. So they're all dependent on each other in order to create a seamless cellular service coverage. But I just want to mention that I can't support it for the design reasons. And, you know, I think we told them at the August meeting that that was our concern. And I just don't see this as a anything I can support. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Locke. Commissioner Dells, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. I'll start by agreeing with Commissioner Locke in terms of an outcome that I am not supportive of this application. And that I say that just doing my job as a commissioner and applying the code of the city of Carmel. Let me take the tangent and say thank you to the Carmel public for really an exceptional banding together and having a voice in something we all clearly care a lot about. And I was ready to not approve this 6 weeks ago, and my fellow commissioners had the wisdom to continue it. And part of the reason was to make sure that the public was fully informed, feeling that perhaps noticing hadn't been adequate and that it needed more attention. And in those 6 weeks, you know, over 370 of you have made your opinions known, and I have yet to find any support for this particular application in all of those. Furthermore, I want to acknowledge the civility, actually, that everyone in this entire episode has shown, but for that large a group of public people to have such a strong and unified voice and maintain a civil tone is just so much appreciated. And that furthermore, you did go to the trouble of doing point counterpoint to really support your positions. It's very easy for someone in the public to just say, I don't like it, and move on. You gave us a lot of rationale for your opinions. As with Commissioner Locke, I'm going to start with just going to the code 1746020A. Wireless communications facilities shall be allowed within all zones except the R1 district. Such facilities shall be discouraged in open space areas, areas of extraordinary scenic quality, and the R4 district. The word discouraged is meaningful to me as opposed to encouraged. So when I hear something is encouraged, it means in my head, I sort of start with yes. And then if I can be convinced, we'll move to no. The opposite is true for discouraged. Discouraged to me means no, we start with no. There's a reason to discourage this. And so in my head, I say, no, our code says, let's not do this unless, you know, we as commissioners can be convinced that there's a really strong reason to support it. And again, applying our design guidelines and our code, I can't get there. And it does kind of, again, come to the things that were cited by Stephanie. Site location development facility shall preserve the visual character and aesthetic values of the community. I do not believe that a 20% increase in this pole and the antenna on top of it and all the ground equipment as proposed satisfies that. It is not preserving the visual character and aesthetic value of the community in that part of town. And then she also mentioned item C, communications facilities to every extent possible should not be cited to create visual clutter or negatively affect important public or private views as determined by the Planning Commission. I think this entire proposal is visual clutter. All components of it are visual clutter. Today, it became even more evident just by visiting people's homes and doing the tour at La Playa, that it is negatively affecting important public and private views. And those views are important, public and private. So those are some of the tools that we have and that I would apply. And then I do want to go back to the R4 district design regulations that specifically address antennas. And I hear the applicant saying, no, that was for television antennas or ham radio antennas. I can't, an antenna is an antenna and this is an antenna. And the first one is that no antenna or its supporting structure shall be located in the area between the front property line and the portion of the main structure or building located closest to the front property line. What I interpret that is that whoever wrote this said, we don't want to have antennas in front yards. And this proposal puts an antenna in La Playa's front yard very clearly. And I think that is inconsistent with this document and with what's right for Carmel. And then the other one is the 24-foot limitation. Sorry, I'm shuffling my papers. No antenna shall be erected within the public view shed as identified, or sorry, not that one. No part of any antenna shall be higher than 24 feet. It says it right there. This is 51 feet. That's twice as high as 24 feet. So I think there's plenty of substance here to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dels. Commissioner Lehman, would you like to make your comments? Gail, you're muted.
Oh, so sorry about that. I am in, well, I was on the Planning Commission in 2019, and firstly, I was really surprised that the Planning Department changed their opinion of this, and that was a little concerning because I voted no in 2019, as did all the other commissioners, and I still feel the same way. In looking at this, I saw, as both Commissioner Locke and Commissioner Dels have already mentioned, that we do have the ability to deny this on aesthetic reasons. And, you know, that's where I'm coming from. But I started researching other cities in California, and I was, it was interesting that Sonoma and Mr. Britton was the Verizon spokesman there as well. But they were, they originally Verizon wanted 7 more cell towers in the residential zones of the city. And to accept conditions from Verizon. However, the Verizon did agree to drop its plans for all 7 cell towers in the residential areas, and did put 3 in the commercial areas of Sonoma. So in the downtown area where we know we already have one, and you know, I always feel like if we have to do this because we don't have coverage, that is the area to put it in and not in the residential area. We're only 1 mile square, and the downtown area is smack in the middle of our 1 mile. So if they can't project for a half a mile, that seems very strange to me. Additionally, in Sonoma, they did deny this for mostly aesthetic reasons, as we have been, as my fellow commissioners have been saying here. But they've also insisted that the 3 towers downtown, they would place all the accessory equipment in an underground vault. And so they were dealing with the noise by accommodating this. Verizon apparently agreed to this. Throughout this process, starting in 2019, and I must admit, I felt very uncomfortable and very pressured. We had to do this because there was a shot clock running, and I felt like there was kind of a firing squad going on behind me, which was not a comfortable feeling. I didn't like the, I was just concerned with the presentation and what I felt was a tremendous amount of pressure on us, both in the 2019 presentation, and it wasn't completely repeated today because we've just gone through this a month ago, and it was pointless. You know, I must say I was really pleased that the residents really walked the walk, as we say. They weren't just talking, they got together, they organized, they researched it, and they had some wonderful points that they made. And they were there to really discuss this very important issue in our town. So I cannot, I was feeling pressure again when people talk about emergencies. I was told ages ago by Apple, I've had Apple products for a long time, that the best thing is to charge it all night and turn it off while you're charging it, that you'll get a maximum charge that way. So my phone is never on during the night. And most people don't have landlines, and our landline works intermittently. It's really a Wi-Fi network. So, but my closest friends were evacuated and lost their home in the Silverado fire in 2017. And their evacuation was by a highway patrol officer knocking on their door saying, "You've got 3 seconds to get out." So, you know, I think we have a police force. We have, I know we have a street that's filled with very close neighbors. A lot of us have lived here for quite a few years. And I can't imagine that the only way we could get evacuated in an emergency would be because Verizon has a cell tower in town and we can be contacted on our cell phones. So I am definitely in support of denying this application.
Thank you, Commissioner Lehman. Mr. Bolton.
Thank you. I'll make this relatively brief. First of all, I'd like to thank the staff for their staff report, and I'd like to thank the public especially for the incredible outpouring of well, opposition in this case, but just the participation in the process. That's really wonderful to see. And so thank you very much. I have a couple issues with this project, and they're mostly design review related. I can't support this. It is a visual clutter. It's not compatible with the neighborhood, as been discussed. I'm just going to go through this real quick. We have view impacts. We have neighbor impacts beyond view impacts. We have potential. I have an issue with this also because we are an R4 island in a sea of R1. If you look at the zoning map for Carmel, this is the only R4 out in this area. It's essentially in R1 district. And this seems like kind of shoehorning something in on an area just on a technicality. The impacts to the neighbors are all R1 neighbors. There's no R4 or any other service commercial or any other kind of district near this property. So I think I look at this more from the lens of the R1 projects, even though it's not technically in that zone. Also, the other comment I have is about the antennas in the front yard. I read the same thing as Commissioner Delves, and I thought it was odd that this was seeming to be exactly that. But the biggest problem is with this cabinet. It doesn't look like it belongs. It's huge, and I just can't support this on a design basis alone.
Those are your comments, Commissioner Bolton?
Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you. I guess I'm the last man standing. I read the staff report, and what jumped out at me right away was it said that we had to make our decision based on the findings. And then right in the findings, you read that there are 2 specific ordinances which discourage this. And if you look up the synonyms for discourage, that means to prevent. And so I do not see how I, as a planning commissioner, city planning commissioner, can make a decision based upon the findings which haven't been made. So for me, it was a pretty simple decision. Now, I know it's a complicated issue, and I know that the applicant has gone to a lot of work on this issue, but we as planning commissioners cannot make decisions which are based on findings, and this does not meet the findings. And I also agree with the comments from my fellow commissioners on the design review. I think it fails on the design review, as stated in the ordinances. So I cannot support this either. So having said that, can we have a motion, please?
Sure, I'll do it. I'd like to move for denial on DR/UP 21-115 Verizon Wireless Carmelo, east side of Carmelo, between, excuse me, 8th and 9th Avenues.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the application.
Mr. Chair, could I request, thank you very much. I think we took a lot of really good notes during the deliberation, but typically during a motion, since it's, we would appreciate any sort of specific direction, because we're gonna have to write your resolution for denial. And so we wanna make sure we capture the sort of like the findings for denial. I certainly heard the concerns about the aesthetics and the antennas, but I wanna make sure that if the commissioners wanna add anything to the motion specific to that other than what was stated during deliberation, that gets added in there.
Well, specifically, excuse me here, while I grab my glasses for this fine print. Specifically, my point was that the findings haven't been met for the 17.46.020.A. That's the facilities, wireless facilities shall be discouraged in the R4 district. And also in Municipal Code 17.46.040.C, that wireless communications are discouraged in the public right of way. Now, additionally, Commissioner Locke gave a very detailed description of design review findings that haven't been met. Commissioner Delves gave comments regarding the placement of antennas, which was also repeated by Commissioner Bolton. So I think that should be sufficient for staff to write a resolution as to why we are making a resolution. We have a resolution on the table to deny this application.
Agreed. Thank you very much for
that.
that.
Is that sufficient?
That's very sufficient. Yeah, I think there was enough before, but I just want to make sure that your resolution is nice and tight.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we have any more discussion regarding this? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bolton?
No.
Commissioner Delves?
Excuse me, if you're supporting the resolution, support denial, you would vote yes.
Yeah,
if you don't want to support the denial, you vote no.
Yes, that's right. Sorry, I support our resolution, so I vote yes on our resolution.
Thank you. Commissioner Delves?
Yes.
Commissioner Lehman?
Yes.
Commissioner Locke?
Yes.
Chair LePage?
Yes. The motion to deny the application passes, is carried unanimously. I want to thank everyone for their comments. It's been a long meeting. We've all, everybody's done a good job. So having said that, are there any more comments from the director?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you all. We'll see you next month.